Yeah, I mean, it takes a while to get it right. But what I'm trying to show here is in this scenario here, it actually causes the thing that failed. Now, don't get me wrong. If there was two async values and one succeeded and one failed, and that caused the error boundary, it's not going to refetch the other one. It knows because of the chain of errors exactly what has failed. So in this scenario here, when we get an error and we retry, it can actually retry all the way up to the data fetching without doing anything special, even though the error boundary is down here and the data fetching is up here. It's because we know the data dependencies and we know the trace back. We're just going, okay, let's try and pull these again. If they're errored, we'll try and reevaluate them. We don't need to rerun the components. If you look here, you're not going to see rendering phrase counter again. You're not going to see rendering message even again. Right? Because it doesn't need to re-render any components. It's literally this little effect down here pulling back on the data. Right? Do you know what's even crazier than this? I thought this was crazy. I was like, man, this is so cool, right? This impact, right? But know what's even crazier? What do you think happens when I click the button to increment again? Give you all a chance to look at this. Yeah, manually healing the yes, because what happens is, I told you before we collected the effects that errored. So if that effect would become unerrored or disposed of for some reason, then there's nothing to keep the error boundary there and it can just remove itself. Right? So we have non-nullable waterfallless, safely consistent async that's self-healing. You guys still complaining about create effect? You get the demo, right? It's funny because like earlier when we were looking at this stuff, we were thinking about, oh, how can we do this with React, right? How can we, it's so funny, like, and I understand, like, going back to create effect for people, you know, like, or with the, like, dependency arrays maybe, is pretty brutal. You know, like, I get it, it's a big shift, but it's like, React's already there, so, like, but this, how do you even express this concept with React and its compiler? That you could technically have something, you know, this isn't the same component, but this error boundary could be down in this component. You have something down here, retry, and be able to refetch along the reactive graph, or be able to clear itself based on something else. Now, don't get me wrong, in React, technically speaking, it could clear itself based on the click happening, because what you would do if you were React is re-render the whole component. And if you re-rendered the whole component, yeah, then it's going to reset itself like this, right? What's cool here is that it's not actually re-rendering the whole component. It's literally just doing a fine-grained update. You know, I mean, I have to get to an errored state. Yeah, it's literally just doing a fine-grained update. Now you'll notice that the original suspense holder came in. There's a couple places where I didn't like the impact of staleness. Like if you error out, I think you should reset back to suspense, because otherwise the second you clear the error, it's going to show the previous success case before the new case loads in, which I think is very jarring to have like the old one come in and the new one come in. So in cases of error, I've opted that the run once of the suspense resets itself again. That's why you've noticed when we retry or to click again, we're back to the original loading screen. There's a couple other scenarios. Any new suspense boundary that's created in the process of a reactive update will also run, even if it's an old async, it will also run the loading state. So we avoid any situations in which we flicker old data for a second before we pull in new data. right? So there's that. But yeah, the key part here is, like, regardless of if you like this tearing or if we should always fall back to suspense, what we have is a mechanism here that's, as I said, self-healed, and it's that same method. Error boundaries and suspense are almost identical. They just collect the nodes that fail, and then based on how many they've collected, they decide what they're showing. So, yeah. Yeah. Set the heels up blows my brain. Yeah, sorry, maybe I should have led with this one. This demo, I thought, like, I got so excited when I managed to get this working yesterday that I like just stopped what I was doing and did a Discord stream for people to give me feedback on how to explain this. Yeah. So yeah, errors and async are all kind of handled very nicely with this model. And if this is the final nail in the coffin for Create Effect, you guys are probably going, what's going on? Well, guess what? There's a success and there's an error here. I didn't show you this earlier because I figured you guys would get really angry at me. But there's not only the tracking context, there's the, like, if it succeeds or if it errors. Async isn't considered an error here, but if it randomly errors because async errored, we can control this, because then we don't need an error boundary. Because what was happening before we did this, me and Dev, is that suddenly this error boundary out here shot, and we were just like, what the hell's going on? Our whole app just unmounted itself for an error boundary for something that's a side effect. Right? So again, render effects don't have this error handler because they're handled part of rendering. Right? So effects are like a micro app. They're like your own separate renderer. You can do whatever the hell you want. You have the control over the inputs async, you have the control over your side effect, and your control over your errors. And actually right now, I might change this. Both the success case and the error case return a cleanup function. So it's possible to like do something during the error state that you can clean up as well. And part of the reason for the split also helps with things like transitions, where the front half might run multiple times before you ever run the back half. Like suspense, the thing that I haven't showed here is suspense still holds effects. We aren't going to run this back half if this component has suspended. This is not going to cause suspense to happen, but if this component were to suspend, we're not going to like fire this stuff when it's not mounted. So it does participate in suspense. It just isn't the cause of it. So you don't have to you don't have to worry about that, right? These still fire on mount, so to speak. But the front half can fire ahead of time. So I don't know why you would do this, and because our async eager, it doesn't matter. But this work gets done immediately. This work is what gets delayed if the whole component gets suspended. Right? So like there's all these compounding decision points, but the end result is something that I think makes a lot of sense and is right. Yeah, I don't know what music store, because we don't really have these kind of concepts, right? But yes, maybe this is thing because our effect is our exit out of the system. Yeah, yeah, sure. I will share this example, Stack Blitz. Was there anything here that that I changed? Maybe I'll keep the is stale. I think that's more realistic. Yeah, I'll share this. Yeah, sure. Let's pop this in. Maybe I should go on Twitter and share this too. Uh, Maybe I'll do that. Well, it's okay. Do you want to? I'll explain this a little bit before. The reason I did it as a separate one is because where do you think the error is happening in this case, where is it? This one? No, this one. Where's the error happening in this case? Remove my name from this example. Where's the error happening? The error is actually happening here. See, I think people are used to try catching in their effect thing. And actually right now, if this part errors out, we actually do go to the error boundary because we assume it's like some user error or something. But there's a whole difference when the error is because of like async or because it's like something coming into the system. It's very weird to have to try catch the front half of your expression. This is, that's why, and it's because if you try catch, you will catch the async as well. And we didn't want you to worry about that. There is a catch error handler helper installed, which will let errors go through, but will like basically it will let async go through, and then if it catches any other kind of error, it will return it to you. But like try catch technically works, and there's places where you can do this, but I think this is why it makes sense to be split, because I don't think people are going to try catch their dependency arrays specifically. Yeah, so yeah, should I post this? Yeah. Let's do this. Healing boundaries plus async. All right. All right. What would you rename create effect to? What's a good name for that? Creating a side effect. What's a good name for it? Watch. Create react effect. Yeah. Yeah. We actually have a concept of reaction. There's already a create reaction, which is one that detaches the tracking from the side effect, which is funny what this does, but it does in a different way. The track is a return function. We actually have create render effect already too, which is also split. Create render effect actually has to be split because otherwise you can't do stuff like transitions. You can't like not update the DOM. You know, you have to be able to hold all the side effects for this async stuff. Well, I think this perfectly. I mean, once you get wrap around your heads around the fact that like React actually doesn't even have the semantics to pull this off because it literally is not the mental model there. They can't pull on threads like this whole this is push and pull, right? Like in a sense like React is this model where like I hate to reuse these shapes again, but they're all I have. React's this model where it's like, I've got, my component here, and then, I have some UI down here, and then I do something from here, and it causes, I kind of send it up, and then my component reruns here. And while you go in this kind of cycle in React, you have my data out here, C, V, 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 a bunch of these like data points out here maybe. And it's a pull-based system because as it re-renders, it pulls. It goes, get me that. Get me that. Get me that, right? This is like a very poor diagram of how I think about React, right? And then when people think about push-based systems, it's more of like, it's, so what do we call this? 3-year-old drawing of React. Yeah, I mean, it depends on what you optimize for, right? I agree with you, but then I also agree that there's value in picking the right name, and I think this is one of those things. It's where HTMX released a blog a while ago about how they're never going to change and they're solid for the web or whatever, and I was just like, that's crazy. It's because like my perspective is like we should be trying to do the best thing. As I said, the Crate Effect is one of the super painful migration ones. There's one other that I'm going to show in a second, but it ironically is also a way to get rid of Crate Effect, and it will be less painful for you, but will be painful for random libraries and solid ecosystem like solid refresh and whatnot. Not painful, it's like a quick fix, but it's easy to miss them. I think the biggest difference, just on a side note, I know it's a thing, between a lot of game loops and stuff is games are generally responsible for the thing that like the what they're building or building out to, and a lot of the whole industry has worked towards immediate mode almost, where like FPS, constant, all that. The thing is, on the web side, we have the DOM. The DOM is retain mode. You putting immediate mode on top of the DOM doesn't make the DOM faster. Like there's basically there's in a sense using these signal observer patterns actually, because the underlying thing is retained, give us the ability to have greater performance because we align more with the underlying system. Whereas building a whole retain mode like or immediate mode like a virtual DOM or something on top is just kind of overhead, as Rich Harris put it. So it's like this is makes it a fundamentally different thing. Yeah, so whereas like when people think about push, it's kind of more like this. They're like, I have this, 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 all our things randomly here. And then they're like, haha, yeah, I should have colored this arrow differently because this is the one, this was the instigator. There, you know, um, when people think of push, um, they're thinking like there's like maybe there's still our UI here, right? But our UI triggers this, and then the update, and this triggers something here. Like this is kind of like the fine grained difference, right? People aren't thinking about the pulling part of it because you're only really pulling the piece that you updated, right? But it gets interesting, and you can see why this is like way less work. 3-year-old drawing of push, right? But like, what if you could control which threads you pull that, right? It's almost the same as this diagram, right? But like, what if like based on certain changes, you could basically pull at only specific threads? It's yeah, I don't know. This diagram maybe is not doing it for me, but it becomes a whole different sort of thing. And that's the way I've like come to think about it. Because when I was working on Solid one, even though we were push pull, we were very eager based, and I never hit these kind of problems. The whole change around making only the effects register with the boundaries and having everything pull through the system completely changes the game. And honestly, yeah, I'm surprised why hasn't anyone else done this? Well, I think the reason is no one else has a fine grained renderer. technically this technology is capable in the reactive systems, but only as of like last 2 months ago, maybe last month, like Svelte got it. Vue is coding about Vapor right now. I don't know if anyone's had the chance to kind of relook at it. Solid had an older reactive system, so we weren't in this boat. And most of the others updated the reactive system in the last couple of years. But Solid also we've been doing this kind of rendering now for like 8 years now. God, it feels like forever. So like this is brand new. So I don't think people have realized, like, for Vue or Svelte communities, for example, this is something they're just discovering for the first time. Whereas like we've already built these patterns and been using them for the last almost decade. So I think maybe like it's just one of those things where both pieces haven't aligned for long enough that others haven't really come here yet, but they will. Just like server functions, just like signals, fine grained rendering, most of the stuff Solid does. Everyone will be here very, very, very soon. We could do it definitely from a TypeScript, but we could. I actually, yeah, I think it actually does throw right now. Yeah, so yeah, right. It just this is like this model is like if you took React and like React. It's funny because they split them up into these fibers that they manage. This is like if you took React itself as a fiber, right? That chain from the front half of the effect through your memos and your signals is like a React render tree. And then the side effect is like the React patch. We get that whole world in the bubble of two primitives, right? Like when we had that very simple playground example here that we were playing around with, you know, this is like this whole thing. This whole thing here is like React. Like it's the whole cycle, right? This is the patch. This is the pole that pulls the thing. But instead of having one tree, we have hundreds of them all woven around each other, independently updating, independent of UI. Yet being able to be authored in a way that's consistent with the same kind of modularity you find with a component model. Anyway. Honestly, like I think this is a hard code mod to do because it's hard to pull out the dependencies. Do you know what I mean? Like it's hard to know this. Um, Flagging it's easy, but it's a hard one. See, okay. While we're playing here in our playground, I guess there's one other example. What else do you guys use create effect for? Maybe I'll make another playground. Let's fork another playground. Okay, playground 2. I, this one's going to be shorter, I'm pretty sure, because it doesn't involve async, I don't think. Let's just make playground 2. Playground 2 is not going to have async in it. It's just going to have a div. And in this div, it's going to have a component. Actually, you know what? It's not even going to have a component. It's going to have another component. It's going to have a child component. And the child component is also going to take name. Next, let's make this a fragment. And we're going to have an input on input equals event, something like name, set name, e.target.value. Okay. Actually, maybe we'll put the child below it. And then we're going to make function. We're going to make child. I wonder if people can tell where I'm heading with this. Props. Prop types are going to be name, which is a string. Actually, we probably should also value bind it. Whatever. Doesn't really matter for this example. And then in our child component, we are going to return a fragment. And in our fragment, we're going to say h1 child just so that we can see where the hell we are. And then we're going to show for now, let's do props.name and see if this builds. What am I doing? No. What have I done wrong here? I haven't actually tested this demo, what I'm trying right now. It is odd to me though that what am I not seeing right now? How if I put a D in here? Okay. This is a compiler error. Damn. Okay, that's fine. The stuff's still very new. What's happening here is we have an effect. Well, we have an effect that's returning something other than a function as a cleanup function. Right? Which is unfortunate because, as I said, this is still very, very new. What I wanted to show you was that if we added another input here, it's fine. We can do this without, let's do this without inputs. Let's do this with, input would have been better, but we can do this with buttons, okay? I can still demonstrate this with buttons. It's a bug that I haven't addressed in the compiler yet, clearly. Okay, so let's set name to Jake. All right. Call this outer. I'll actually make it cleaner what we're doing. Okay. Okay. Ta-da. Okay. Yeah, sorry. This stuff is still raw. The split effect compiler stuff is still not 100% perfect. Okay. And then what I'm going to do here is make another button. And on click, well, what am I going to do on click? Well, set name to Joe. Okay. Okay. So what are we doing in here? Now you'd be like, well, there's no set name here. Now, how many of you have had this scenario before? Create signal. You want something that you can edit locally, but you also kind of want to initialize it from the props, right? Right? So we already know outer works. Inner isn't working though, because we are using props.name. Let's change this to name. Okay, sweet. But the problem here is, sure, inner is going to work now, but outer no longer works, right? Outer is dead, right? So how do we make it so that when the props change from above, we can reset our state, and that when we can still update it locally, you know, maybe there's like an on save thing on our child that like when it's done committing, it'll update the parent with the updated data. right? So what we already said, async was one of the reasons to use effects. Like the real subtitle of this stream should be like all the ways you don't have to use effects. I already showed, basically got rid of a lot of effects for async. Right, but it's got to be writable as well, right? I think Svelte gets to steal my thunder here because I proposed this primitive like 2.5 years ago, but only implemented it like 6 months ago. So I think Svelte's actually already implemented the primitive that I wanted to make, right? Because the problem with well here let's try a derived drive name. The problem with derived name is we can't write to it, right? If I go create memo here, which is the same as derived in Svelte, now I have to do like a weird switch where like I have to decide whether to show this or to show this. It's like if, right? The answer, the answer, now we've all seen this, which I don't know if I need to explain why this is bad, because if we could do this, set name props.name, right? So this will work, sort of. I guess it only sets it once because it's the same state again. So if it was input, this would be easier to show. So this works, but the problem with this is there's going to be a time. It's not such a big problem with us, but if we put props dot name here as well, there's going to be a time where I mean, it's so quick, but there's going to be a time where you're going to see two different values. You're going to see name is Joe and Jake next to each other because the prop will have updated, but then we do a render and then we update and then we do the render again. Again, it's not that important because we're only updating the one thing, but there's going to be tearing with this. This is why we do derive stuff in the first place so that we can funnel it through. Right? And this is why React doesn't want you to do this. The answer in React of how to solve this is actually really quite cool, sort of. They tell you to key the component by name. That's one way. They go key name. That's one way. The other way they do it is that you basically can check something. You can be like, if basically the answer is do this. Set name props.name. They actually don't want you to use an effect. If you look at the docs, they essentially want you to do this, which what it will do in React, it'll cause it to render the front half of the component, realize the state has changed, and then re-render the front half of the component. But it will do that before it runs the actual, like, don't get me wrong, it runs the whole JSX, but it won't do any DOM stuff. It actually interrupts it before it actually does the heavy lifting, like the back half of the effect, so to speak. So it just knows that it has to run it twice. This is like create computed in Solid. In Solid, if you do create computed, you won't see the tearing, but that part of the graph will run twice. This is why we had create computed in Solid. The whole reason, but it's eager and I wanted to get rid of it. But the idea was this way, this will update before the rendering happens. And in React, inline will do it. The one thing you don't want to do is do an effect though, because it causes the whole render cycle twice. So this was bugging me so much in Solid that I came up with a really simple solution for this problem. What if we just went like this? Do it again in the original context. That one order, that order, that one. Basically, in Solid, if you store a signal or a function in a signal, you actually have this unfortunate downside that you actually have to call the setter with the function form because we can't tell the difference between the function form and the setter. If you know in Solid, we have like set x plus 1, So we can't tell the difference. So if you have a function that you're storing, you actually have to use the setter version. You basically have to do this. You can't just go set function because it'll think it's a setter function. You can't just do set function. So this technically is a pretty breaking change, that if you want to store a function after this change, you actually have to do set function. But we are smart enough that if there's no reactivity found inside this expression, we recycle the memo that would have been created and throw it out. Internally, someone's already suggested this in chat a few times. What we're actually doing is creating a signal inside of a memo, which from a correctness standpoint means that when you read name, you're actually reading from both the memo and the signal. And this keeps order correctness properly, which means that it's right. It's not the same as writing in a computed. I get this question every week, and even from people who are advanced kind of reactivity people, and they're literally asking, why can't you write to state in effects? And it's like, it's not a good idea. You lose the graph, it splits, you get this weird tearing, even in a synchronous state. So you want everything to be derived. This is why we're doing derived async. As you move more things to being derived, suddenly the need for effects starts decreasing considerably. Sorry, Paulo. I think, do you guys have... Do you guys have these? I think Angular's calling them linked signals or something. I originally called this create writable, but then at some certain point I was just like, why don't we just accept, this? So there we go. You don't need effects for async, and you don't need effects for state synchronization. I mean, yeah, I mean, you could do that in this case, definitely. And then, but like, yeah, I mean, this is just showing a declarative loop here. I mean, the difference between this and what Solid actually does, like in this case, is actually very minimal. Solid basically compiles to almost that. Like it's on click. Yeah, I mean, there is a signal in the middle. So controlled, it's true, especially with things like actions these days and stuff, we've moved away from a lot of the controlled inputs. But again, let's not make an excuse, right? What are systems other system WebSockets? Well, that's it depends on how you want to get it in, right? That's being at the edge of the graph. Effects are fine. I said that they're the way out of the graph. Well, actually, no, this isn't effects. How about descriptions? You just write the signals, right? Like it's very hard to leave and enter the system within the same synchronous cycle, right? Technically, if you have WebSockets, they can write to signals. So they're allowed to be at the end of the chain. Trying to synchronously feed out to the other system and have it feed back in again and be consistent is difficult. So, closing the loop. But generally speaking, WebSockets are going to be on this side. WebSockets events write to signals. Does this also work with stores? All right. Thanks for setting me up for the next topic here. Because I identified that there was basically 3 reasons why why people would want to use effects. And those 3 reasons are async. I mean, unnecessary reasons. There's reasons like interfacing with the DOMs, reading from the DOM and doing animations to write to state. There are cases where you need effects, don't get me wrong. But it's like, generally speaking, it's async. It's state synchronization, which both of those are just the same problem. They should be solved by deriving. If you actually look at the internals of create async, it's actually almost identical to this memoized signal implementation. It's the same higher order signal wrapper mentality. We didn't have to do it for create async because it's at the edge. The one thing that's interesting is if something is happening on a different cycle, like outside of the system, you're pretty safe to write to signals. You don't have to worry about it. But now the problem comes in is I think one of the most common places people do state synchronization is with stores. Now, stores, for those who aren't familiar, are these crazy proxy objects that are super nested, reactive. Every property can be reactive. They can fine grain update. The power of stores, I haven't built a to-do MVC with this version of Solid, and I don't want to waste your time doing that. You can watch my front-end masters course when I do that. But I did build the JS framework benchmark, which I don't have a version of with a new one right here, but it's almost identical in code to the old one. If I go to the JS framework benchmark and we look at this, the API I have changed slightly for stores, so I guess that's another breaking change. Although this one will at least be an easier migration, is to do solid store. Okay. The reason I'm showing the JS framework benchmark is because essentially a store can have, data and objects and all these things in, and you can do stuff like all this crazy stuff to it, which sets it deeply. But I guess in order for us to show what we want to show today, we probably do have to do a little bit of store manipulation. So let's start again with a store here. Actually, you know what? Let's keep this because I think this is a good example, and we'll fork another playground. Playground 3. Okay. Maybe it should be renamed Dangerously Create Effect. I mean, it's always been that intention from React's standpoint. The problem is React didn't provide the tools. They did not solve async, and they did not solve state synchronization. You had basically no choice. I can't blame the developer for that. I saw this immediately when I create resource originally for Solid back in like 2019. But I mean, the React ecosystem saw it at the same time. Why do you think TanStack query is so loved? I mean, the Remix guys go on their thing, well, never need use state, blah, blah, blah. That's the thing. But the truth of the matter is that started much earlier when basically when Tanner introduced TanStack, I mean, even GraphQL to a certain degree, you saw this, where the whole state solution could be inside like Apollo or whatever, and have nothing to do with like the typical React use state. So much of our state is driven from the server, which means so much of our state is kind of derived, which means that we can significantly reduce the surface area of writes. And if you do that, the predictability of your system goes up incredibly, because then there's only a few places that can actually cause mutation. Now, this is all like theoretical, whatever, garbage, ivory tower, whatever. But there is some strong principles in this. Not pull. Well, you need it. The escape hatches have to exist, right? Like it's just, we should make it harder. We should make it harder to do bad stuff with them. One way is make the API so unergonomic that no one wants to use it. I'm not suggesting that's intentional, but but yeah, okay. Let's move on here. We might make a child component again, but let's I mean, I can almost port. You know what? Maybe I can port an existing to do MVC example, right? Like we have one, don't we? To do, like if I go GitHub, not GitHub. If I just go like solidjs.com, I don't want the whole to dos. If I go to the tutorial, I made a to do somewhere like years and years ago, right? I just go here. There's like a to do somewhere. To do, create store mutation. It's mutation. Is this it? Then if I solve it, big props. Oh yeah. Oh god, these guys are so ahead of me. They're already using. Someone updated these examples to use produce as the default. That's lovely. I didn't even realize that had happened. That's that's beautiful. That'll make my life so much easier here. Thanks to whoever did that. Anyways. Okay. Yeah, sorry, it's like the whole app. Let's just go here, we make that app, and then we don't need this one. We don't need this one, because these are all now just from solid.js. I don't separate them, and then we can just delete produce. And then we can just, oh, that is actually kind of convenient using a hybrid of the class stuff, but it's fine. Actually, this is just wasteful, right? Think about it. If you have to-dos, oh no, but you have to find it. Yeah, it's fine. Whatever. It's fine. Right, you have to go to equals to-dos dot find t, where t.id equals id. So yeah, props on, and then to do dot completed equals not to do dot completed. All right, delete all of this stuff. Hopefully this still works. All right. Oh, do you know what's going to happen? Can't use to do MVC because of that other bug. Oh, or is there 2 render calls at the bottom? There is. But I can't, I bet you the input bug that I haven't solved yet is going to get in the way here. Yeah, damn it. I'm a little bit ahead of my time on showing this. Okay, that's fine. That's fine. We'll do something a little bit different. Yeah, okay. That is too bad. This is why you got to build the examples before you actually do it. Produce was an API that we used to do mutable. It was really kind of fun, ironic. Internally, we're mutable inside stores, but we do an immutable surface area because we believe in read-write segregation. But produce let us mutate directly again. And one of the biggest changes that making to stores in Solid 2.0 is that the mutable version is the default version. I don't care about mutability versus immutability. I care about read-write segregation. I don't want the portability, there. One of the most interesting things about Svelte's compiled stuff was I was like, oh my God, did you guys make it so stores can't leave the file they're in? Like, deep nested reactivity permeating through the tree with random mutations is one of the most dangerous things imaginable. Almost every framework has some kind of guards against it because it's implicit two-way binding. It means it's just like, oh, butterfly effect. Someone mutates something here that they didn't realize was part of this there, and it's like, bang. This is the whole reason why React won. That it is very, very important from my perspective to be very careful about what you write to. But yeah, unfortunately for my examples here, it looks like that I still have some holes on this. It's funny because a few months back, I actually made a stream where I created to do MVC without the JSX compiler completely by hand using DOM updates in the new reactive system just because I could. I don't feel like putting you guys through that right now. Like, I could definitely build this from scratch, basically just writing the compiled output, but that would take me a while. Yeah, exactly. It's not about the mutation as about being explicit on who has the option to write. It's the same reason when I was showing this graph earlier here that I was like, the less effects and people writing effects mean like the less points that this entry happens into your stuff. Okay, so we're a little bit early for to do MVC, unfortunately. So what am I going to do here? We're going to just do something a lot simpler. Let's get rid of, I mean, the checkbox should be fine. That was weird on change. What I'm trying to, it's weird to try and guess what, it's funny because this input seems to render fine. It's the second that we add something that things get messy, which means that there's something in the row. Oh, I know what's wrong. I wonder if this is what it is. I completely forgot about this. Sorry. Oh man, TypeScript should be doing more help for me. Got it. Beautiful. Okay, you guys might be going, what the hell? For is doing a function. Now, this is just me being freaking hyper optimizing. It doesn't, you probably shouldn't do this. I'm not going to stress over it right now. Essentially, why does for take a function? Well, the reason for takes a function is because I got rid of the need for for and index and keyed. They're all the exact same control flow here in Solid 2.0. So the way I had to do this is, even though this function call is completely unnecessary and it never moves, if I can give it the same API, and then you're just like, okay, if I actually want it, to behave as index, I just go keyed false. Okay, now it behaves the same as index does. And if I wanted to key it by a specific key, well, then, I can pass a specific key here. But the idea here is Solid generally doesn't use keyed, but there was no performance overhead and basically no extra code, like a couple like small little sections here to combine all the control flows. So now there's 4 different ways to do control flow. Essentially, that are optimized for different cases. There is basically keyed for, which is optimized for shallow diffing. It's what React and every other framework does. We don't need it, especially when you have deep nested reactivity. It's kind of a waste. There is, and that's why Solid doesn't have keys generally. There is index, which is optimized for shallow non-keyed stuff. And the reason for that, again, is both of those essentially create signals per row. So your data doesn't. So your data can just be a single signal, and you can just be like, here is list. Here is, in both cases, here's the list. And then the control flow creates signals that update specifically by doing a diff inside. Now, if you have a store, this is actually the case where for is optimized, because essentially, if you update the to-do, you never, this is, see this creating text here? It's showing you here this for this reason, because when I check this box, yeah, there's some bugs here, but when I check this box, it's never going to console log creating text again, because it doesn't need to. If I add something else, see, creating it. So essentially, it's the whole run once, memoized, whatever thing. Even sorting the list, you're not going to create this again. Which means that when we update the toggle, we don't actually run the for logic anymore. We literally just go, oh, there's a to-do here, update that one checkbox. Like, everything is granular, and we don't need to rerun the list. This is something that React can't do, and compilers, this is almost why I think everyone moved to runtime reactivity, because compilers have a really hard time doing nested reactivity. Marco team, we were working on this, and we were like, we ended up going runtime, as well. It's very difficult with a compiler. So this is the second thing that we've hit. I'm not going to say that it's impossible, but this is another place that it's very hard. And basically you get the auto, this is better than the auto memoizing compiler or something like React. Because again, if you do the state update up here, they need to, even if they can decide, oh, I don't need to check this, I just need to rerun this component and then check which rows change and all this. We skip the whole rerun the list, rerun the component. We literally just go straight to the point, right? That's why stores are powerful, because when we change this to do not completed, like just this one switch, we don't need to re-render anything. We just go DOM, one effect. Now, this is great. if you insert an element, does it insert a new signal in the middle and it doesn't update the others, or it updates every one? No, it doesn't. If you use if you use a key, like a non-keyed, it would impact down the row. But when you're keyed, which is our default here, it does not. It just updates the one place in the middle. It does not impact any of the other rows. It only impacts. Now, I said there's 4 cases. The 4th case, there's actually a new control flow in Solid for it called repeat. And repeat is also, I don't have to do much work here because they already made it in Solid primitives. I first wrote repeat 4 years ago when I was like doing some code sandbox demo. Like, I can't even, is this going to make me sign in with GitHub? Probably, yeah. Okay, 3D, no, cubes. I was trying, there was this crazy concurrent React, maybe it's boxes. Yeah, 2-year anniversary. Oh, this version doesn't use it, sorry. Yeah, this version doesn't use it. Sorry. The very first time I made this control flow was quite a long time ago. It was this one. And I realized that this was a non-keyed example, right? Now, you guys might remember this example. You know, you do this and you just do like this. And every framework made a version. Solids was obviously way faster than everyone else's. But the key to this was that as you scaled up, we didn't want to recreate the ones that were already created. And we didn't really care that. So I created this repeat control flow essentially. And the way repeat works is repeats a count. So it does a number of times. So if any new rows are added, it will do it. But otherwise, the trick with repeat, and it doesn't matter as much here because boxes is like a signal and not like a store, but it'd be more in a store, is it only needs to change when you never pass the list to it. It only needs to change when the length changes, which means everything's fixed by index. And then when you do one fine-grained change, it just updates. So it's like the non-keyed version of 4. And honestly, if keying is not a problem, this has to be by far the most optimal version of iteration, because essentially nothing causes this to rerun except for adding a row. You can never update a row. There's no additional signal. This I is a constant. There's no accessor. Like, basically, if you update the data, like switch the row, it's just those 2 rows will have their data changed. So any properties that listen to the specific data, like you could have the same value on 2 different fields on the 2 rows that switch, and that specific thing won't be triggered because it's the same value. Again, I think keying is very important. There's a whole thing on that, but I realized that this one is not the same as the others. So technically, we're still going to have 2 control flows. We're going to have 4 and repeat, but keyed and index are no longer needed as they're the same as 4. So our baseline defaults to better for people doing nested reactivity. It doesn't have to be stores. You can do like signals and signals or whatever, which is what I think I actually did here. But because it's even more performant, slightly less proxy overhead, but stores are a billion times easier to deal with. Why is it okay to destruct to do? Well, it's because to do this, if you want to know, this is why I said this is bad code. The reason it's okay to destruct to do is because it's keyed, right? If you looked at this example here, it's keyed. This function will never run again. Will the ID of this to do ever change? No. Will the text of this to do never change? Because we don't give you the way to edit it. So this is like this is basically like back when I wrote Solid in 2017-18, I did this kind of stuff a ton because I was just like, because if I pass a value in, I knew from a compiler standpoint that this will not see a function, which means that it will skip creating an effect, which will be more performant. So like I was edging out micro stuff, and that's why I'm saying it just doesn't even matter. It's just dumb, but you will see this. The reason this doesn't matter is because I know that this will never change. Use keys. Sounds active. Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing is, I'm wondering if we'll get to a point with, and I'm gonna have Tanner on maybe very soon, and maybe we'll have to like completely rethink of how we do these things. Those libraries are built for React. He's had come up with his own granular update system. I'm wondering how these things kind of jive together, because one of the things that I'm kind of going to get to here, which is we need. I'm trying to think of the right demo. This one's harder for me to demo here. There's two, and I've actually demoed it before, which means that I should have an example here, but I don't. It's that, what if we want to derive stores? And I'm trying to think of the best example I can show here. The JS framework is the best example, but I should have pushed it up beforehand, because the idea with a drive store is very similar. I noticed that a memo is just the setter function for a signal, right? You get the previous value in shape. So I noticed that a drive store is just the setter function from a store. So we call the new primitive is called create projection, which is like projected to-dos. I mean, we could probably play this game. I don't know if I would do it this way. It's also an array here, so we'll take the S. We'll call it the S for now. And then what we will do here is, what if we did something? And again, this doesn't make a ton of sense because it's almost like a diffing tool. This is kind of impractical, but we could do something like along the lines of like, for let I equals 0, I smaller than to-dos dot length, I plus plus, and then we could do something like s dot si dot text equals to-dos I dot text to uppercase. You know how I always like to uppercase everything. Is it text? I can't even. These examples weren't originally. And then theoretically here, then I should be able to put projected to-dos in here. And if everything goes properly, what? Oh, did I forget to import it? Create projection, create store. What did I do wrong this time? Oh, is it? Yeah, okay, lovely. This is why I probably... Let's see if it gets in here. I'll try and debug this for a second. Console.log to-dos. This is the problem with using mostly broken stuff. It's there. Length signal is the same as what I was showing earlier, where I was showing that you could just pass a function to the signal. Line 10. No, the store doesn't have isn't a function call. This is just not. Am I missing like a closing bracket or something? Like, why are these all red? Oh, I mean, this is just TypeScript issue because it's technically like a array of ID, number, text, string. Was it done or completed? Boolean. Yeah, okay, so that's not my bug. Okay, lovely. I mean, you can at least hopefully see it from an API standpoint, what it can do. This is kind of excessive though. What you would usually use projections for is diffing. I use it for create selector in the JS framework benchmark, where what this can do is have a selected value and then only notify the rows where the selection has changed. So instead of like if you've ever had a scenario where you have like 1,000 rows like in this thing, and well, you know what? I know this example works because I've been benchmarking it. So why don't I just pull this into the browser? Like there's no real reason not to, right? Sorry, you should go to raw. This code isn't updated, but someone really hyper optimized this. Looking at this, this wasn't me. Like this is as compact as I've ever seen it. I've actually never done the store version of this, to be fair. So maybe that will be fun. Let's do this. So it's root. Okay. Root. All right. So we got to do a couple changes here. Crop ID. This whoever did this is just like hyper optimizing stuff. We need create projection from solid.js, and then this is at solid.js web. Okay. They're spreading arrays into props. Man, I said I was about hyper optimization. Okay. Okay. This is crazy. Okay. One thing we're going to have to do first is that for is now a function. So we need to update every location that row is specifically. Okay. Create selector doesn't exist. Good, 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 good. Okay. Perfect. Okay. Let's go here. So usually what you would do is you go if row ID equals selected, set the class. Okay, let's do this. Okay, so we don't have all the styles here, but let's create 1,000 rows. Hopefully, am I gonna crash this place? This is so fun because like I didn't realize just how much. Oh, it's because this is using the freaking. I've never done the store update. So this. Let's do the signals version. There'll be less stuff to change. Do the signals version. That's still firing away in the background. All right, let's try this. So it's root for, okay, this is solid.js web. Sure, let's get rid of batch. Don't need that. Let's get rid of create signal. Let's put create projection in here. So we will need that. And then what else do we want? We want for to be a function. There's one other place for it. All right. create selector does not exist, right? We were copying that selected, and then we will go here, selected equals row ID. Bang. Okay. Create 1,000 rows. Will I be able to see the selection state? Not because we don't have the classes. Okay. I mean, I can obviously inspect here. And if I look and I click one of these, you're going to see danger float around here between this one and, yeah, I mean, you can see it. Danger. You can't visibly see it because I don't have the classes for this right now, but you can see the selection state move on the TRs, okay? Okay, so the way this would work in most frameworks is it will basically, on selected change, go through all 1,000 rows and do this check. In React, it will re-render the whole thing 1,000 times. In modern frameworks like Solid, Svelte 5, Vue, the default is it's going to just trigger this one like effect on all 1,000 rows. Right? Yeah, I mean, sure, you're right. It's the same concept, right? We can use a style binding. And then we can say style, I don't know, background, maybe something like background, color. If selected, it will be red, something like that. Lovely. Haha. All right, good enough for our purposes, right? Okay. Now, I created this problem was pretty common because there's basically different ways you can solve this, right? One way is you could put on the data, you could make like an is selected on every row and then you iterate and switch it yourself. But that's kind of cheating the point of this benchmark. The idea is the data is coming from the outside. You're not going to like change the shape and now add is selected. It's very common that this is an ephemeral state on top of like a database state. You have a database state which actually has, it doesn't have a selected field. It's something that where this is different. And now we could pull this into a separate component. And technically, if we create local state and switch it, it's the same difference. Like if we set a prop and synchronized it, you kind of get the idea. Like it's going to be driven off this on a per row basis. So I was like, what if we didn't? So I created this thing called create selector, which is really, really special case for this case. But what I realized is that it is a part of a general problem because what you really want is you have a projection, right? And this projection, someone was asking where the S comes from. It's just an initialized empty object for a store. So we're going to give it like that. And then what we're going to do here is we're going to say that const select S equals selected. So it's going to listen to selected. And then if, and actually we're going to add one more thing here. We're going to add a let previous selection. We'll need this later. But essentially what we're going to say is if previous, then we can do s delete s oh sorry, I'm reusing this thing. Let's call this row, or what are we going to call this? This is what are these? I guess they're just rows. Okay, rows. It's not even rows. This is like, I don't know. We're going to call it P for now. I don't have a good name for it. But essentially, P, we're going to delete, because this is basically the ID. So we're making an object map, essentially. And then we're going to say, P.S equals true. And then simply previous equals S, essentially. We could probably make this more optimal than that, but the tricky part is the previous isn't I was debating having return value of something, but it's like an arbitrary thing. You could also store it on it itself. It's just the previous is actually of S, not of projection. Do you know what I mean? So okay, so now this is selected, and then we can go in here and we go. Now it's an array, so we can go is selected row ID. And if this still works, this should still work. Okay, not quite. So what didn't we do right? There we go. Okay. Thank you. Delete previous. Yeah, sorry, my bad. Okay. So this is the gist of the idea. And you might be going, what's the difference from this? Well, this is a sparse object. So it basically only has the keys of what's selected. But it means that whenever this runs, it has the ability of essentially deleting up to one field and setting one field. So instead of triggering 1,000 rows, it's going to only trigger the one row or two rows that changed, because this that it's projecting onto is a store. This is a store object. So each property is reactive, right? So instead of running 1,000 rows, and I actually did the JS framework benchmark, it is slower than create selector. But if you've actually been like watching, like Evan Yu did like posted view vapor results and Svelte, and they were like, everyone was like, open in browser, what's going on here, right? Because they both view vapor and Svelte were slower here. Well, yeah, solid is create selector hacks slow, but create projection is actually decent. It's actually faster than this vanilla implementation here. So it's basically the same kind of thing, but this is now a generalizable tool. So you might be wondering how to make this work. Yeah, well, it's mutable. I have a whole article on this. It's mutable derivation, which is mental. But I can, the problem is, if you return something, there's only one thing that you're forced to diff. You have to do the diffing afterwards because you're returning the one thing. And if you put everything in a single function, like a memo, like there's a reason they have that API. It returns something. You can't say I want this specific thing to update. And I did a whole stream on this, and I did like several streams until I arrived at this API, where I realized that this is like the reflection of the setter was the key, right? A setter for a signal returns the next value, but a setter for a store mutates the current value. Deriving it has to work the same sort of way. But as I said, this is super powerful because we get the fork for the first time. Everything that we do in reactivity converges. Like, you know what I mean? Like memos, multiple reactive signals, and they kind of get drive down. You can have different things converge together. But this is the first time that we can take a single signal and converge it out. Actually, it's not the first time. If you think about it, not the way we use for, but the index and keyed for in a reactive system are a projection of like the index is a projection. Like you're basically saying I have like a single signal coming in those versions, and then I'm going to push them out to multiple things that update independently. I realized that I'm calling projection, maybe this is the wrong term, correct me, but there's a whole category of reactive problems that we're already trying to solve today that are actually this: create selector, for loops in control flows, a lot of diffing problems from like server data. They all actually use this thing. If you have a create async and you want to diff it, this is the perfect place to do the diff, because you can get fresh async data and then you can project it out into, so just the fields that change. You might have seen create async store in Solid Router. It's basically create async fed into this, so to speak. There's a whole category of mutable reactivity that people are sleeping on. They basically have signals. Dev2. I think the best. I'm not going to spend too much more time on this because, as I said, I did a whole article on this. But it looks like this. Signals, stores, memos, right? Like it's this kind of thing. It's like, what the hell goes down here? I'm not sure. This is not for aggregates. It's the opposite. Aggregates, you haven't. It's hard to do aggregates, and I did a whole stream about this topic because it could depend on order. It could depend on this, and you're still converging values. You're reducing. Memos are good at reducing. Computations. This is the opposite of aggregation. It's going from. That's why I call it projecting. It's going the. It's not aggregating. It's going the other way. Right? But basically what I said is, look, from the source side, on the mutable side, you have signals and memos. That's why, like, in React, this is the only thing that exists. Stores, on the mutable side, you have stores on the source, but no one's conquered this area. Well, I think we have, and I'm going to show you how this is possible, because there's some problems, but I've actually solved them now. Okay, so from an API standpoint, I think I'm hoping you guys get it. It's basically like, it's almost like a diff in a can. Like, this is a great place to put Solid's reconcile function. And in fact, in Solid 2.0, reconcile and our store implementations actually, they actually do under the hood object swaps of proxies, which means you can do immutable diffs. You can pull in something like Redux and just diff it, and it won't mutate the original objects underneath. Sure, if you go and do this, like mutate, it will mutate, but we have immutable diffs on mutable stores, which is going to be a huge boon for a lot of libraries, because this way stores don't actually modify the underlying, and as I said, interfacing with stuff like Xdatum, and that will just work like this. I did this. I don't know where you want to do it, but yes, you can create a store and pass a function as the first argument and then the value, and it does the exact same thing. So you have writable projections as well. The implementation of that is kind of funny because you're literally just writing to the underlying projected value anyway. So like, but yes. So yeah, everything's symmetrical. So yes, we have create stores that we have writable projections, just like we have derived we have derived stores, just like we have derived signals. Yeah, well, what this is this is an object, or yeah, this is an object, a sparse map. So when you set something to true or delete it, you're just changing two keys on a store. You're saying S1 delete, or sorry, P1 delete, and set P2 to true. So like here it's 4, so I'm going to delete 4 and set 2 to true. It just toggles two separate signals. Each property on this is a signal, like a proxy. Every nested property is a potential signal or proxy. Um, um, I don't know if it matters that, I mean, stores are always good on made for like tree-like data, so I'm not sure it actually changes anything. I mean, the biggest trick people have with tree-like data is the fact that we keep this we control the mutations from the set function side. I think the way that we now use setters in the same form will help it, but I don't think it changes much. I did do a bunch of diffing. There's a UI bench. I did a whole bunch of performance testing with the new swapping, which is really cool because stuff that's never listened to never gets signals created for. And this includes, that means also when we do diffs with this immutable diffing, things that aren't listened to, we don't actually have to diff. We just swap. So it makes our store diffing way faster. So it's something like double the speed of what it is in Solid 1.0. I'm not. I'll go more into the store details, I guess, on that in a minute, or maybe, nah, I'm not going to bother today because the diffing is cool and it's one of its superpowers, which lets us interface with the immutable world. But I really want to focus on projections because the problem with projections are, if anyone saw my initial implementation, it was literally like create effect, write to store. The thing I told you not to do, or create computed. Like it was slightly better, but we didn't have create computed in Solid 2.0. So it's actually like create render effect, right to store. So it was like happening before the other effects, but it was not good. It was like using like that. Yeah, it was just, it wasn't good. Because you have this tearing problem because here's right. Now, this is where the question is, how do we make this work? Yes, stores are recursive. And that's why, if you've ever seen any Solid Start demos around server actions and stuff like a To-Do or Notes app, it's incredible because you literally are doing TANStack style revalidation writing with single flight mutation with optimistic updates. And we're actually, I haven't talked about this, projections are amazing for optimistic updates because you can take an existing server state, you can take a future optimistic state, and you can merge them in the projection. And then when the server state updates and like goes, yeah, it's committed, you can diff against the projected state rather than diffing against the reconstructing this, like the state again, which means that the diff can actually only change the things that changed between the updated state and the projected state, which means if the optimistic updates were correct, no work happens, no components rerun. So essentially you get these like with a combination of a couple other things we're doing with projections where we're doing kind of like collecting the mutations from the optimistic updates and applying them one at a time onto the projection. This way, instead of resetting the whole thing, we're just applying them one at a time. We didn't need to reconstruct the state and copy it and clone it over and over again. It was like fine grained, like, oh, update the text on this thing optimistically. Well, we're just updating this one state thing, update the one place, updates the one place in the DOM. But then when the server revalidated and sent the data through, because the diffs matched, we also did no work. It was basically the same overhead of having purely client-side rendering in an auto invalidating system. Yeah, I mean, that demo is crazy. And we basically were faking projections. Projections were the primitive that we wanted for that Strello demo. If you haven't seen it, it's absolutely nuts. No framework has solid. No framework has version comes close. I'm kind of sad Ryan Florence didn't even look at it because I mean, I don't know what you say. It's probably, yeah, like nothing has touched this. See, a lot of the things I've been working on here are, and why I want to share this stuff so that more people benefit from it, is these are general things that I think can apply and help the whole community in terms of reactivity. So, okay, how do we solve the fact that these are create computeds? Let's get into that. Oh, one thing, we still need transitions because you still need that ability to hold in the past, especially for routers. I haven't implemented it yet, but its transitions are almost identical. I mean, I want to work on concurrent transitions so that we can have multiple at the same time, but essentially, conceptually, they haven't changed. I think what this means is that end users, like developers like you, don't need transitions. Routing libraries will use them, maybe a couple other things, but 99% of the time, the end user just doesn't bother with that. Basically, it's not I know this is like such a React cop-out, it's not a feature for you, but like, the reason that we would go for this like run once approach is so that people just wouldn't have to worry about it. Because right now a lot of people use transitions because they just like don't, or they have to use deferred value and stuff because they just don't want things to like slam up on them and get like yanked out. I think transition is still important, but now you just won't need them. So, okay, how do we make this work? Well, obviously a computed writing obviously reaction writing to a store is super performant. In fact, it's more performant than we have today. But there's problems because if someone before I render, maybe an event or something asks like is selected or something, it's gonna get the old value. In the reactivity tree, when we're like processing the effects, by that point, we can queue these on first. They're pure queue. We can like run them before we run, some of the other things in the pure queue. We can make sure that they run before, say, the effects and stuff. But if someone wanted to like set state and read it right afterwards, it doesn't work. Now, with memos, it does, right? If you go, it's like my old diagram where I show that like the three timings of signal, memo, effect write to the DOM, and how there's like different consistency. Solid has followed where Vue is, and Svelte has followed as well, where basically pure reactivity is in sync and effects are delayed, right? Solid could force effects to be in sync, but I think this is one of the other changes, that probably won't affect most people, but it is something to be aware of. But the problem here is projections, if they're scheduled, like they're basically effects, you can't see past them. You're breaking the graph. It's like the create effect write to signal. So, and then so one way that I thought of solving this, as I said before, is ordering, because you can get to this problem. Let me pull up at Scala. But you can get to this problem where projections can depend on other projections. So what are they? Projections are derived. So let's use these, right? So, and actually, you know what? I might not even have to draw it. It's a lot like this problem, where depending on the order of which one updates first, you might see the old value. It's actually the flag problem again. This is, yeah. See, I don't know what the technical term is for here. Morphism. Then, yeah, maybe some mathematician can tell me what's up. It's funny, the React team, I saw this now. React team basically themselves said that they didn't really want to do transitions. But I mean, I think they're great if you can use them. They just have this unergonomic aspect that you have to control the right point. So maybe everyone will use them and it'll be happy days. I don't know. But what I'm saying is the problem with projections can kind of come into this thing where if these happen out of order, then they'll see stale values and have to reevaluate. It's kind of really awkward. So one solution I came up with that I thought of was, what if I ordered these? But so like basically like made an ID and based on creation ensured that B always ran before C, right? That could be a solution, but it doesn't help with that. It means that when we process a graph, pull from D, it'll always be right, but it doesn't help the person just randomly getting the value, when they're like, hey, what's the value of this projection, after the set state. It doesn't work like a memo, essentially. So I was like, okay, let's go back to the drawing board a bit. So first thing I tried was, what if we just notified everything, right? Like pretend this is our scenario. What if when the projection updated, we just basically notified everything? So, and this is kind of close to where I got to. The idea is inside the projection, it's a proxy. So we could take the actual memo, right? Let me pull up the code again. You see how there's like, this thing is like a memo in a sense, like this is a reactive computation. There's something reactive running here. This is a tracking state. What if we took the memo, and we returned it inside of the store? So every time you accessed a property on the store, every single property read from this signal, like this memo that we're using here. And if we did that, then since they're all subscribed to that signal, whenever we update anything here, every single thing that listens to it would be notified. And then if someone asked for that value, it would be able, even if it's not part of the graph and not scheduled, they'd be able to pull the latest value, because it'll be like, oh yeah, I might be dirty, check me out. But the problem with that is I did that, and it was slower than just not using projections in the first place, because it still queued all 1,000 rows, tried to run 1,000 rows, but now you had this like extra proxy you were dealing with. So I was like, okay, I have a really performant solution that's incorrect, and this correct solution that is really unperformant, right? Because like the whole point is you don't want to do all the work, right? Otherwise you wouldn't be doing it. But like there was a good thing about this part, because this part didn't actually need to run all the effects. Because if you look at this function, it returns undefined, right? Even though it mutates this thing, it returns undefined. That means every single element that, listens to this or property on this gets notified saying, hey, I could have changed. But when they go and check, they're going to be like, oh, yeah, I didn't change. Unless someone actually changed the property that they were listening to, like they're going to just see, oh, this projection is still null. It's null, then it's null. So it never actually updated. So even though it could have updated, they're going to see that it doesn't update. So this row won't run over and over again. Like this expression won't run over and over again, but it will have to queue and check if it should run over. So you still queue all 1,000, you still do 1,000 checks, which kind of sucks. But at least it doesn't run, right? So my solution actually is kind of interesting. What I ended up doing is kind of go somewhere in the middle. What if we notified everyone, but we don't queue anything? We basically say, hey, you guys, you all could be dirty, but we're not going to queue you. Which is a kind of an interesting thing, because if you don't queue them, then how are they going to do any work? Well, they're not. But everyone knows that they could be dirty. So the benefit of knowing that you could be dirty is if someone specifically asks, hey, am I dirty? Like, get me the latest value. They'll go like, oh, you might be. And they'll check all the way up. And then they'll get to the memo. And then the memo will be like, oh, yeah, I have to rerun again. It won't change. So it won't, tell everybody to run. But at least you can ask the question lazily. We don't even have to run the projection immediately, because if someone asks for it, they'll get the value. But what's interesting about this is we still schedule it. So it still runs. And if it runs, it will see that it was notified with a flag that's like, hey, this was notified on a no queue run. So it'll go, okay, well, I'm notifying it for real this time. It will bypass that. So anything that's actually changed will then, it'll run. It'll go, oh, actually delete this thing, update this thing. The things related to those two will then queue themselves on for real and actually run. But essentially, we kind of created, I don't know what to call it, like a firewall, where essentially, yes, there are more things out there that think they could have updated, but since those things won't get queued again unless someone else says, hey, you probably updated, it doesn't really matter. So we only actually, in the end, while we tell all the 1,000 things that they could have updated, we don't actually end up queuing anything or checking anything. And as soon as either it runs on schedule or someone asks for it, it's able to actually push out only the 2 updates that matter. So we both protect the graph, because any this scenario, like this fetch before this, or someone randomly grabs it, we'll say, oh yeah, I need to check that. And they'll see it, and then they'll write and cause themselves to be like, oh yeah, I've changed. So we kind of basically create this barrier between everything downstream in this. We kind of hold the execution to either when it's asked or when it's scheduled. So in a sense, it's scheduled, but it's also lazy. And obviously we don't care about, unless someone asks for it, we won't care about it until they actually try and pull it. So from the outside perspective, it's the same as a memo. It's completely lazy, only used as needed. But internally, it's actually masking the fact that it does these writes. Okay, I don't know if that makes sense to you all, but it's basically, it notifies but doesn't queue the work, and only queues itself. And then at the future, it can, when it figures it out, it can choose to only queue the correct work. So we get both correctness and performance, which is what I was showing here. Not only is this a general solution to a problem, it is also, sorry, where is this? It's also a performance solution to handling this whole category of problem. Um, yeah. No, I mean, generally speaking, I I don't think, yeah, yeah. A mutation-based reducer, yeah, I guess so. Except the thing is, you end up actually spread because of the granularity of the store, the underlying mutator. You actually get the ability to fork from like one signal back out to multiple signals. It's super powerful. Um, I get why we this probably would cause us to lose a couple people on the stream, so to speak. But I hope you can kind of see the power here because this simple little primitive is ensuring that only these two rows run in a way more performant way, and it has tons of uses. This is not like a super common one, like to the same degree as like create memo is. Most people don't think in terms of projections, but for places where you have a singular source and you want to get back to fine grained, this is the key. Bunch of data from the server that you need to diff, and then you don't want to bother like updating, re-rendering the whole thing just because you got like all fresh data from the server that's different. If you have a single selected state and you want to project it onto the rows, it's basically the mechanism behind for control flow. If you want to project dynamic indexes onto something, like basically this is just, there's a whole category. It might not be a common category, but there is a whole category of stuff here. It's funny that, oh, it's because I haven't done update every 10th row. I'm like, it's funny the batch is here. We don't need batch anymore. Update every 10th row. They refresh it, I think. There we go. Okay. Yeah. I mean, and the fun part about this is we can create selector for this scenario, right? Like that's kind of fun. The fact that maybe someone won't actually do this, and instead what'll happen is someone will use this to create another primitive. Like, what if they wanted a selector? Honestly, unless you're performance oriented, maybe this particular scenario doesn't matter. The funny thing is I hit this scenario before I ever did JS Framework Benchmark. I was working on a media app, and we had an admin section that had tables and tables, and we also did photo grids, which were tables and tables essentially. And like this kind of selection kind of mechanism, the way of projecting out this data was a problem that I had to deal with all the time. It bugged me that like everything would kind of rerun. So I wanted to solve this problem forever. I don't think this is purely academic. Just my experience lends to that, just because I did so much work on dashboards and like photo grid stuff and social media. That's my background. So yeah, I think this is good. Memo to one protecting the many, yeah. Yeah, I think with stuff like this, repeat, like I think there's a lot of really powerful primitives. The other place that I'm really excited about this is local first. I think that this kind of mentality of using stores or projections, because I was looking at stuff like Signia and all that stuff where they're passing diffs along. There might be cases where you want to pass the diffs along, but there's also going to be cases where the overhead of diffing at every single step and passing the diffs and transferring that is more than just forking it out again. So I'm very excited. I think this is a direction that others should look into in the future. But it's one of the superpowers that we're looking at it with Solid 2.0. I mean, you definitely do, because React can only handle component. But the thing is, like, the problem with React, the same problem with async, you need use, like use Jotai Atom. This is why there's no comparison between external storage plus React and something like Solid. Like, it's just not, it doesn't make any sense from the model. Like that self-healing pull the thing down. Like you can't do that in React. Like it just doesn't make sense. You absorb the state where it enters the component tree, and then everything below it is impacted. Whereas here we push everything right down to the last possible place, the closest we can get to the DOM, the closest we can get to the user, and then we pinpoint push where things could update, and we pull through. So it's like, yeah, I mean, it's just there's basically no equivalent. Make maps with accepting case before. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Cool. So we did the JS framework benchmark. Projections, healing, async. I think that's the core of what I wanted to do on this part of the stream. I don't know if it's time. It's probably time we should switch modes, maybe talk this week in JavaScript. I don't know. Does anyone have any questions? Did people enjoy those demos? I mean, there's more stuff in here, but like I didn't show it, but class list becoming just class helper, generically handling CLX type stuff. There's so many little improvements that we're looking at here, yeah, I'm going to talk about Solid 2.0 more generally after this when I get into this week in JavaScript. But in terms of the 3 topics today, I think we're good. What about on mount? I still have it right now. It's on mount is fun because technically it still works, but it's only the back half of effects. So use it. But if you put something async and you read it in there and it throws on you because it's not read in any other reactive thing that would cause it to suspend, well, it is what it is. Maybe we can give you a good error, like if maybe if we get a not ready error in the back half an effect or an on mount, we're like, hey, you probably need to add this. You probably need to use an effect, or you need to add it. Like that React, like you need to add to the dependency array kind of thing. Like I kept on mount because people love on mount so much. One of the interesting things that I haven't really shown here, and it's only take a second. Let me go back to my other examples. Maybe Playground 2. Is this the one I want? It doesn't really matter. The one where I was really looking at effects. No, this one is the nested, maybe Playground. No, I guess the one I was really looking at the effects was the dev demo or whatever. But what I wanted to kind of call out is that effects here have it's the on cleanup thing. Basically, because they're split in half, right? Because create effect has tracking and non-tracking context, right? You have 2 things. Technically speaking, on cleanup works here because the component part is part of the pure side. Now you might be going, that's crazy. You're creating DOM elements. How that's pure? It's not the creation that's impure. It's the insertion that's impure. So technically components run on the pure side. They run on the left-hand side, and all reactive ownership and stuff happens on the left-hand side. Basically, when we're rendering, we're putting stuff and layering, it happens all here. You might create effect inside an effect, but it's on this side. It's not on this side. Creating more reactive primitives is all on the left-hand side, which means on cleanup works fine here. It means that on cleanup works fine here. I don't know how many times you're going to do this though, because conceptually speaking, I use on cleanup internally for like keeping reactive reference counters, right? But you're probably not going to need it for that. I know there's like classic hello world example for people where they see Solid set that timer top level with on cleanup, and everyone's like, wow, you don't need an effect to just do it. The problem is if you do that and it's off screen, it's going to start your timer before everything mounts. So you should be using on mount or an effect. Otherwise, with async stuff, you're going to basically start doing work when you're not even attached. So this is true about Solid today too. People did those demos, but those demos were never really correct. It's easy to be illustrative, but the other problem is people would do stuff like on mount, on cleanup, right? Next to each other, which is not, this is not a parallel. These on cleanup registers with the parent, on mount is here. Now it's never going to update, so it's not a big deal. But technically, like if you're doing SSR, this is weird because on mount is an effect, so it doesn't run, and on cleanup will run because it's part of the peer. So technically, what you should have done is this. You should have put the on cleanup in the amount. And it makes a lot of sense because if you create something in here like const t equals, set timeout or whatever, or set interval, then guess what? You have the t here to clean up here. Whereas before, we did not have the t here. Like you'd have to hoist it out. It actually makes sense to put the cleanup inside the context of the thing that you're building, right? So this is all fine, but I just want to kind of point this out. So realizing that, I bit the bullet and said that this could now be the cleanup function like other things, right? Cleanup, clear, interval, t, right? So this is a better approach than doing top level with on mount and on cleanup and without on mount, because this will run when it's attached rather than when it's off suspended or in a transition or something. But it also means from this perspective, this is also true because without the reactive context, like there's a difference between these two. This can run multiple times and you should clean up each time here for that, but you don't want this side cleanup to clean when this cleans up because there's this separation because like again, transitions could run or suspense could run the front half more than the back half. So technically speaking with the split, it doesn't make sense to move this here because it's not tracking, it can't look it up, and it's not the same thing. It's a different cleanup from this cleanup, which means that speaking, I mean, we could try and like look it up and do something smart, like, oh, we're in effect mode, add it here instead. But the gist of it is, how often do you actually need to do a cleanup here or up here? And the answer is probably almost never. So one of the other effect changes I did was having on mount and create effect actually return the cleanup function like React does. Now, again, this might not be a popular thing, but what it means is that on cleanup is also going to be it's just another surface area. It's going to be something else that almost never gets used. So like if you notice this pattern, adding derive things to signals, deleting create selector for create projection, which is more general, create async. I actually have a list here that I think I'm okay sharing with everyone today for my HackMD, which I call my inventory of reactive primitives. And I think I change this almost weekly. So it's probably a little bit out of date, but I'm going to share this now for the first time. I think what you're going to find here is that, where's the copy share link? Is that the total surface area of helpers in Solid is actually significantly shrunken. But if I use it like a camera stream, I want to use it on cleanup. Yeah, you use it in an effect or on mount is what I'm saying. No, what do you mean you can't do an effect again in the right side? No, the effect is on the right side. Sorry, maybe this isn't clear. This is where the effect is. Like do effect. It's on this side. This side is like track these. Track these do effect, return cleanup. So this grouping makes sense too. You don't want, you probably aren't going to do cleaning up like the cleanup here. It has a potential with scheduling to run more often than the back half. So your camera stuff, what things like a camera stream, I want to close the stream, might just be like this example here, which is like set up camera, return the cleanup for the camera. Like it's this. On mount create async. Why? And no, this won't work because you're trying to create a reactive primitive on the right hand side. You should create it on the left hand side because on mount, this function is this function. It's the right hand side. Oh yeah, well it's because the oh I'm talking about nesting. Like in Solid, you can nest reactivity inside reactivity and inside reactivity, but it's under the kind of presumed ownership context, which is basically the way. I don't know if this helps people at all, but this memo, this front half of the effect, even this component which is getting rendered that this is in, are all the same. The things that are not the same are the back half of the effect, the function in the on mount, and this click handler. Those three things are saying there's two different zones. There's basically the zones that are what I call the pure side, which are basically every single thing top level in the component, everything in a function in the memo, and everything on the left side of the effect. So that's one zone. And then there's a second zone, which is the right hand side of the effect, the function in the on mount, and the click handler, which is the non zone. So there's like, I don't know, like there's two separate contexts that we're dealing with. There's the in the system, outside of the system. Vanilla is that I thought was. I haven't had to change anything. I think one thing that's sneaking in is a bunch of people. All the code seems to have like optional chaining. People like writing it so much in Solid. I was very careful not to do optional chaining. You'll see a lot of ands. So maybe it's possible that we will need. I haven't made a final call on this, like transpile. Like I'd rather Solid not transpile. Like I might just remove all the optional chaining. A lot of our newer libraries have it too. People just really like using the newer syntax. But yeah, otherwise, like we're ES16 still. Two contexts. Yeah, I spent like 40 minutes on this earlier in the stream. I can't really get into the detail too much. Let's see if I have the playground still open. I might spend like a second here, but I might not have it. We spent a very long time on this. Oh no, I do still have the playground open. Yeah, let me just zoom back a second. It's because with async, we have no, if you ignore everything after line 10 here, we have no, if we put in a single context with async, we have no idea what this logs. Even if this returns A string, B string, C string, based on timing with this throwing, it's completely unpredictable what the single context can do because it'll interrupt at different points at different parts of the process. Yeah, I mean, almost everyone supports this stuff, but you have to understand when you're building for something like Solid, you have to consider like people who use Skypack or no build or like there's so many criteria, you know. I mean, there's even people who use web components. So like it's just like you there's a lot of craziness out there and I have to kind of account that not everyone will just be using the tools that I prescribe. It's part of the choice and part of the power of having a solution like we do. All right. Oh yeah, what happened to merge and split plots? Yeah, sorry. They're down here. I just shortened them because I call them store utils. Technically, they work on any reactive object. So we maybe merge props makes it clearer, but this is merge props. Split is omit. We'll talk about this. It'll be RFC. Right now I'm sitting on this because the problem is the first argument that you get back from split props, or the front half of it, probably is unnecessary and it's an extra proxy wrapper. You should just use the source object through rather than that, because it causes unnecessary like layers. So this is an example. I talked to the guys all building like the component libraries like Cobalt and whatever to get their feedback on this. And this is an example of where we can change the API to encourage better performance patterns. So omit is basically split and merge is merge props. We could call it omit props or merge props, but really it works on props, but it also works on stores and projections. So I thought that the name was too specific. I mean, I can go over this list really quickly so you understand. It's the source state, which is create signal, create store. Makes sense. These can also have derived forms of them. There's derived, create memo, create projection, create async, which we've shown today. There's effects like create effect, create render effect, which I haven't shown, but it's almost the same as create effect, and create reaction. This is useful for some weird third-party stuff where you return a tracking function. So instead of it running together, you can basically pass around the trackability for it, and then as soon as whatever's in it updates, it runs once. So every time you call track, it can react up to once. This is really useful for integrating with things like React. Like I made React solid state this way. It's not useful outside of that. Ownership, we have create root. Classic on cleanup, run with owner, get observer, create context, use context, create error boundary. Utilities on track. Flatten is like the parent, is like children. It's the core of children. We're still gonna have the children helper in solid. It just uses flatten. So it's just, this is more core talking about like what's in the signals implementation. Flush sync, which is replacement for batch. Resolve, which is, it's this idea. It's kind of, it awaits an expression. So it's kind of like, you know how stuff could be async? The idea is whatever expression you put into resolve, if you await it, you'll get the value. So you could pick something async. Like you'd be like resolve user, an array, users and posts. And it's like promise all. It will basically, when those signals resolve, you'll get the value of users and posts. It's basically a promise all on signals. Latest, which we showed, is a way of opt-in to tearing, where it'll try and get the latest value if it's available. Is stale, we saw. Catch error, I talked about earlier, which is this ability to it's just a try catch that lets async through. Has updated is we haven't talked about this one today, but I've talked in other streams. It's this idea that inside of any reactive computation, you can go, hey, has this updated since the last time the parent ran? So you can tell which signals triggered the computation to rerun. It's useful for stuff like in projections for diffing states. Like you can go like, am I running this because we added a new optimistic update, or am I running this because the data from the server updated? And that can change the flow. You can go like, I'm going to diff in this case, otherwise I'm going to partially update. Create suspense. This is the core behind the suspense boundary. There's also a create flush boundary that's more primitive. I haven't decided if I'm going to put that out, but there'll probably something like off screen here. Run transaction. This is use transaction or start transaction. I haven't developed that out yet, so it's still there. Reconcile is how you diff stores. Unwrap is how you pull out the core object out of stores without all the proxies. Omit is like pull out, basically give me the props without these things. So it's like the back half of the split props. Merge is the merge, and then map array and repeat, which are our two operate. This maps over an array, and this is our repeat control flow as a basic function helper. All of these are part of the solids or the solid signals library. These are all core. This is why it's kind of funny because people are like, "Oh, standalone signals library." Well, these concepts have to be core. This has nothing to do with JSX or whatever, but solid signals is all of this functionality. This has, while there's some render type concepts in here, they are so core to it that I don't see. It's funny. Everyone wants me to pull it out, but it's like there is no real pulling out. I can just pull everything out now. The core solid is actually really small. It's just like client export this plus control flow, and then server re-implement a different version of this that is pull based instead of push pull. So, for SSR or whatnot. So it's more performant. But basically, the solid package's purpose now is aliasing between different server and client builds, where this is a purist, always reactive version of all the core helpers we need. They could be, but like anything, the specific solution is more performant than the general solution. So for things like the mapping control flow, I'm going to, avoid the proxies. It's also important because not everyone can use proxies. There's a whole mode in Solid that if you follow certain steps, and I've talked to people who work on things like television, Solid's very popular on like TV apps and stuff because of the low memory and high performance, that we actually, if you don't use proxies and you don't do like a certain couple patterns with spreads, we will not create any proxies, which means that Solid can work back to like Chrome 39 or something. See, like stuff like optional, like null checks and all that, and coalescing operator and stuff, optional chaining, those don't matter because a language compiler can do that very easily. But certain other things like proxies are like impossible to polyfill. So it's important that we do try and support really, really old devices. So for the most part, store stuff is kept to its own lane. Oh, native browser signals? Yeah, I don't know. I just wanted to show what's possible. Now that I've done it, let's see what we can do with native. Solid Start need its own platform like for Self to Next, but no. I mean, I'm going to talk a bit about Solid Start in This Week in JavaScript. I'll give you an update very soon. I mean, it's hard to say. There's a lot of commonality on the core part until you get to the effects. The current proposal, if it was super performant built in the browser, I think I could build this on top of it. So I'm fine with it. It's just anyone who's like, oh, let's just hook signals into the DOM directly, I'm sorry, guys. That's not a great idea. I think I like signals as a TC39 spec, not as a whatever spec. I know RxJS has had to circle the whole pot trying to figure it out. None of this is going to stop me either way. I just like the amount of understanding that's come through these new exploration has just been immense. Yeah, Chrome 53, that's pretty good. I think 49 is like an awkward spot. But yeah, the people, Lightning TV is a big one, guys. Comcast, Peacock and all that kind of stuff. They use Solid. I've also talked a bunch with the Netflix people. I don't know where that project landed. I think I would have heard more if it actually completed, but it's definitely something that I have in mind. Could be profitable. Yeah, I mean, sure. I don't know about businesses. I just make cool shit. Yes, definitely. On Cleanup still exists and it's in this list. I'm just saying that this is an example where I think the average developer who uses Solid will probably it's going to be easier and easier to literally just use these and not use and pretend most of these other ones don't exist. I mean, there's a few of them. Istale might be useful. Untrack's obviously useful. Flush Sync. Reconcile. These are wrapped. Yeah, it just like, even though this list has about 30 things on it, I think a lot less. I think we've streamlined it a lot. To be fair, and this is no slap at Tanner because and honestly he's going to come talk about it. The area that Tanner works in, I don't care very as much about. like I'm a mechanics guy. So when me and Tanner talk about something, we'll be like, okay, we could do this. And he's like, oh yeah, that's really good for this. And then do this. And then we'll like bounce off each other very rapidly, which is really good for us working together. But like, I have to admit, he's shown me the stuff. Most of my feedback has been, this is really good. I hope someone builds a library for that, but I don't want it core. If that makes sense. Like, PRPC in the Solid ecosystem does a lot of the stuff that Tanner's built wrappers over server functions, a lot of that stuff. And I think it's very important. I think the type safety is very important. But I think quite often we get into this zone where like, I haven't actually like the part where I get focused in on are the parts that I feel that we actually did nail with Solid Start, and the parts that Tanstack Start is actually borrowed from us. I think in the future, Tanner's sense of what developers actually want is going to be the core, and it's why I'm not the guy to lead Solid Start. I've said this multiple times. Someone else will do it, and they will do well, and maybe Tanner part in this is very core. Maybe these just become the same projects. What I care about is like single flight mutations, like the whole data flow, isomorphic loaders, all those things. Those are all things we had in Solid Start that Tanstack ended up borrowing. That's the level that I'm thinking at. So I'm very stoked because Tanner is doing like a second pass. He's improved on like what we've done with Vinci. So we'll be able to replace and improve pieces because of that work. But I have to admit, you've seen everything I've been showing here. I have not looked at the Start projects for like 4 months. Okay, let's switch modes 2 seconds. I'm going to full screen, and then we're going to go this week in JavaScript, which I think is going to be pretty fun because we got some hot React action coming up. Actually, it's been like 3 weeks, so I need to pull some together. Yeah. Yeah. Did I kick the hornet's nest enough? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I have so many notifications because of what I said earlier. Let me just try and sort out my profiles and stuff, and then we'll kind of go from there. This is a good time to like, subscribe, all the stuff that I'm supposed to tell you on the videos. It'll help to get playback later. Very much appreciated if you do that. Let's go to my profile and then duplicate. And then we can go to bookmark. Sorry, I'm just trying to get everything organized here for 2 seconds. All right. When was the last time I streamed? I think that's the first question. I think it was January 24th. Did you guys watch the Angular documentary? It's all started on Virtue. Yes, Tanner is moving on to yeah. This was a coordinated effort. So yeah, I mean, I'm gonna talk about it. Solid Start is still on Vinci. Tanstack is still on Vinci. We had a meeting in the January when I was just like, we were kind of like, enough is enough, and I got all the people working on Solid Start to kind of officially make a Solid Start team. They were already doing the work, but just make sure they could automate it and I wasn't the blocker. Tanner was sitting there in the meeting, and we just basically just laid out a plan long term where we continue to merge or converge the projects. Right. We'd already kind of decided that Vinci wasn't able to be sustained by one person, and it basically enabled what was possible before. Like, we wouldn't have been able to release Solid Start back when we did without Vinci. It would have been impossible. But now it is possible. Tools are catching up. There's still work to do. So yeah. How do you monitor future signals? I've got some really cool demos, but I've literally spent 4 hours on them, so I can't go back there, Dax. But all I can say is I've got like self-healing, async, granular. It's really cool stuff. Yeah, there's like a bit of a lull in the minute where everyone complains about create effect, but if you get past that, there's a there's a really good demo in the middle. It'll have timestamps eventually, but yeah. But okay, so January 24th. So let's scroll back the time to January 24th and talk about. Oh, that's so suitable. That's so hilarious. All right. Yeah, I'm going to talk about Solid Start as well, obviously. And then finally, my own channels. January 24th. Oh, right. I remember the last stream now. All right. Let's kick this off and get started on this week in JavaScript, okay? Let's do it. All right. Not like that. More like this. Okay. So, yeah, I that tier list I think went over pretty well. I'm glad there's some awakening for some people to understand the scenario. I'm not going to focus too much on that, but the actual very first post is so thing. Uh, yeah, I mean, I put on my own profile, January 27th. What do we got here? Yeah, 10 stack, solid. Never bet against Vite. And for anyone, we're going to go into this topic in a few minutes, but this is completely a subtweet about the React team and the Create React Apps situation. I wasn't sure how they're going to resolve it because let's face it, this has been like 3 weeks, but I saw the conversation and I'm like, you guys are crazy. Um, that simple. Like, Vite is a force that you can't just kind of like push under a rug. It's the most positive force in the JS ecosystem, probably in years. Like React was like that at one point, but Vite has been consistently the thing that people are most happy with for years and years in a row. So yeah, I mean, we're going to keep that in mind as we continue through the rest of of this week in JavaScript. But I didn't know the CRA thing was still going on because the truth of the matter is Theo brought up that issue like 2 years ago or something, or like 3 years ago, and they were like, "Oh, we're going to do this, blah blah blah," and they did the recommendations. I had no clue that it was still like this big dragging issue. It's like most people are like, couldn't they just switch to create Vite already? You know? And the answer to that is complicated, and we can talk about that in a bit. But what I'm getting at is whatever answer they chose clearly was not to choose Vite, and I think it's an interesting decision. That's Vite, says this no bundler joke. Oh, man, Astro is king. Astro is awesome. But yeah, I mean, we'll look at the new React intro stuff and see if Astro's mentioned in there. Hashtag no build. Yeah, yeah, yeah. The only thing more detached than web components. Although this not betting on Vite thing from a React perspective might even be more crazy. But let's kind of go into it in a minute. Okay, if you guys didn't check it out, I got the chance to be in my second Honeypot documentary, which the Angular documentary. Cool story. I don't know enough about the internals of Angular. I honestly didn't pay attention to it until Pavel reached out to me about signals, so I can't really speak too much to it. People were trying to teach me stuff, like back when I was like a writer on an Angular blog site writing about Solid. I mean, the community's always been great, but I don't. Some people complain that this was like a little bit one-sided, but I think the important part isn't where Angular was, but where Angular's been heading. There was a switch that happened 2018, 19, 20 kind of time period, and it's been paying off the last couple of years. And I think that part of the story is really interesting, really compelling. So yeah. If you haven't seen it, it's worth checking out. Um, yeah, okay. Yeah, that's a React topic. I want to see if there's anything else I can talk about before React. What's the biggest turning point for Solid? I think I talked about when Dan Abramoff announced hooks. It's kind of funny how sometimes something that's like a necessary solution for you, like direction for you to take for your tool for it to work, can be done better by others. And it's like it's like one of those tensions where do you keep things the same to hold on to your grip, or do you try and progress to move to the where things need to go? React, in my opinion, always took the right choice generally to kind of move with the future, at least historically. But it is an interesting thing because it was them moving to hooks, which made people finally actually pay attention to stuff like Solid. It was what made Svelte 3 happen. It's what made Vue Composition, API and Vue 3 happen completely because of React hooks. So for me, it's a huge turning point. The ironic part is it didn't actually make Solid JS happen. We already had that, but no one would have been paying any attention because we weren't the only ones back there that had that. There were other libraries doing this kind of thing, just no one cared. Okay. Let's jump over to here. Yeah, this news. I'm gonna do some Solid news here for a bit. God, Tanner's been just making lovely jabs the last little while that I think is just hilarious. Could you think that Solid can be the most boring dev tool ever? Yeah, because nothing re-renders. And I think we just showed that nothing even re-renders when it's async and off the page. So, good stuff. But a lot of this stuff has been about setting conventions for Solid 2.0. I started fishing to kind of get an idea of how we could standardize stuff. Do people look at classes? This was trying to determine if we could use class list type functionality for normal classes, because it's really awkward if someone goes props.class and it's like an array or an object or a string. Well, apparently, even if 13% of people claim that they introspect, not a single one of them commented to explain the situation where they do that. I was like, if yes, please comment. Like, I don't care about that. This is the only portion that I actually care about. And this, yeah, one person, Ryan Shaw, you're my hero. The first actual example, it happens with Tilwin, e.g. did a user pass in BG color, if not add a default. It doesn't happen out, and most people probably use a library like Teamwork could string a CLS automatic. Exactly. But like out of everyone who in the poll, not a single person who said yes actually gave me an example of it. So I think it's fairly safe. Anyway, the other one, obviously, I was asking about this. It seems like most people are fine with taking HTML type stuff and not copying React. It's not even copying React because we can't copy React. I'm not going to like do a bunch of weird transformations, like make area into camel case when it's not. It's more of like, do we just make things convenient, like look nicer? And the general answer I'm getting here is not so much. It's not that important. So yeah. Oh yeah. The birthdays. Should we talk about that for a minute? Do you know how many people have birthdays in the same few days span in this community? First of all, you guys may or may not know, me and Tanner have our birthday on the same day, which is interesting. We're both Aquariuses. But we're not alone. 2 days before our birthday is Rich Harris's birthday. And 2 days before that is Dominic Ganaway's birthday. So two main people from Svelte community as well. David, who's our community manager, he's the day after my birthday. So it was definitely it's definitely interesting. Every year it sneaks up on me and I'm like surprised, but there you go. There's like a rule that if you have X number of people in a room, 2 people have the same birthday, but this is like kind of crazy. So yeah, it's just, it was funny. We came up because me and Dominic, like we chat. I should have given some more reference here. It's not out yet. We'll see. The Svelte community is working on similar async stuff in the same zone, especially the run once stuff. They have their own kind of version of run once. So like we're fairly aligned, so we've been talking a lot. And it was actually Dominic who got me to like I told you, it's just a one line change in our solid implementation, but he's the one who got me to say, okay, I'm going to turn that one liner on and see how it works. And he was just saying, we were just shooting the shit, and he was just saying, tricky thing with Aquarius is like we build our mental model. That's like how we work. Our whole world is our like projection of like how our mental model. It's kind of like a common trait. And he's like, generally I don't think much about astronomy, but after seeing myself, yourself, Rich, and working in this zone, and like how our opinions work, and maybe butt heads on a few decisions about consistency of our mental model. He's like, I definitely think there's something here. So yeah, it's strong opinion and analytical kind of thing. Anyway, crazy. Yeah, yeah. INTPs and INTJs probably a little bit too. Yeah, a lot of ints though in general. So yeah. Okay, yeah. So let me switch back here. Talk about that. Okay, let's talk about Solid Start for a minute. 1.0, 1.10. So the first minor release in like 7 months, I want to say. And this happened with me giving the keys away. The the There's a whole process in place now so that maintainers manage the release of this Vite plugin solid. I'm finally like, there's always been maintainers in the repos and GitHub in solid, doing stuff. But before anything ever got shipped to npm, I was like sitting there as the guard dog, being like testing everything and being crazy about it. That's not sustainable. So now we have independently working teams, not just people contributing and managing PRs and stuff, but people actually doing releases and working around the clock. I should have done this ages ago. But now Solid Start is working completely as a separate entity from the work that I'm doing, which is great because they're merging in Tanner's new stuff and they're getting stuff going. I call the Gear 5 obviously after one piece, but it is really ramped up. We've been working very closely with TanStack team. We've been in their Discord. We're working on the plugin. We're building that shared base. Vinci was a good start, but now we're taking it to the next level. And I'm very excited where this is heading, especially because I don't need to actually, it freed me up to work on this stuff that I've been showing you today. So this is very promising news. Big thanks to the people, what I call the start team, especially Burke. Burke is, if you have someone to thank for moving this stuff forward, Burke has always been the main contributor who's helped the most. Whenever a new version of Vite comes up, make sure all the plugins, make sure everything works. Burke has always been amazing, and still is working now, basically leading this effort along with Attila here, and then obviously the others here have also made big impact on this. So like, yeah, as I said, I'm far enough away from it now that I can't even speak to too much of that, even though I did write this. You can already see from the change log, things are finally getting kind of ironed out. Hire them all, yeah. No, this team is great, right? And I know Alexis got in on some issues helping make decisions, and Nikhil's still around when we need him, but this has grown beyond us, so I'm very stoked. So yeah, very awesome news on Solid Start stuff. They've had a couple releases over the last couple days, so very, very cool to see. Job posting, just getting that in there. Okay, we already talked about all the stuff. Okay, I'm gonna share this out here. The examples I showed you today are published to npm essentially on the branch. So I showed a lot of these features off, but there is the beginning of a plan in place to get Solid 2.0 on going forward. Right now we are at the experimental stage. I still need to iron out the approach to SSR and hydration. Once we have a full story, as the client's mostly like done from a prototypical standpoint, but once we have the full story, then we can like start talking about, hey, are these the right APIs? I'm going to start writing up RFCs. We're going to get community feedback. You know, we're going to talk about migration, talk about what that looks like. Right now, this is just capability. You know, we wouldn't have self-healing async and error boundaries if you know, hadn't tried it. And some of the stuff I'm thinking about for SSR and hydration is equally crazy. Right now, Solid's server rendering is a lot like React, actually. It like re-renders from suspense boundaries. I'm looking at a completely pull-based system using the same techniques that I basically employed in the client to do suspense and error boundaries. I think it's possible to make it render once without having reactivity, without having it being expensive. We can pull instead of push. I've got crazy ideas of how to get rid of hydration IDs for hydration, which would be huge for Solid because, as people probably might already know, Solid has the fastest SSR renderer, but it's slowed down by those hydration IPs to kind of knock it back down to the same range as everyone else. If we didn't have those hydration IDs, the use approach we did, we're by far the fastest SSR solution. So it's like, it was fine because I knew that with the trade-off. But I think there's an approach here that will make the Solid approach clearly heads above the others. So I'm very stoked to be able to try that. And as I said, these might have API impacts and considerations. So we need to at least get to that level before we can start talking about how we can bring this into your libraries, and even talk about what the shape of the APIs are too much. Finally, you know, when we get to beta, we're going to be looking a lot about documentation. We're going to be looking a lot about code mods and migration efforts, and trying out Cobalt and, you know, our CN, you know, libraries, and make sure, you know, TanStack stuff works with it. And so that there's no timeline yet, but the process has been kickstarted. You can go to the branches, you can see the commits, you can participate. Where as we roll this out, I'll be having more updates, you know, in the future. But I'm content now enough with the stuff I was showing today that conceptually, I think directionally, I can see all the pieces kind of come together with this new base. And yeah, there are some breaking changes. That's going to be part of this, which is why, you know, I've delayed doing this until I was sure which ones are key. Like, obviously, some of the stuff doesn't matter that much, but like, obviously, create effect is a very noticeable one because it's a core primitive. The other core primitives aren't different, or most of them are easy to migrate them via like legacy imports. And I think for create effect, we might even have to do that. We'll have like create legacy effect, and people will just deal with it, I guess, if they can't figure out how to split it. We'll talk about those kind of strategies as we get to it, and like actually consolidate. There'll be an RFC on the effect splitting and stuff like that before we get to that point, so we can get actual feedback. But right now, it's just like looking at what's possible. That's generally how we always approach these things, right? You know, it's not about like build it quick. What was it? Build it. Make it work. Make it correct. Make it fast or something. We kind of do stuff in the opposite order. So right now we're mostly interested in like pure mechanically, is this performant? Is this the approach that makes sense from like the opposite perspective? So that takes a lot more tinkering around before we can actually decide on these things, because they can be impacted on capability. Solid Start. I'm working on Solid. Solid Start, I am not doing much work on. And my ultimate goal, like, I don't know, if people really like TanStack Start, there is completely a future where it's just the same thing. Like, it's just like CLI Start, and then it's like choose Solid or choose React. That's not out of the thing, because Tanner, as I said, been very receptive on a mechanical level about the stuff I care about. And it's just a matter of like, does he know how to create the type of experiences that developers want to use? I think so. So I'm cool with that, as long as it checks off the boxes to be super performant and like mechanically doing the right things. Yeah, just start. Like, it's hard. Like, can you picture like Svelte is different. But look, it happened to both me and Rich. Like Svelte got put on hold for Svelte kits. Solid got put on hold for Solid Start. I could have done this. The crazy thing about this, and you've seen my hack indies, the stuff I showed you today, I basically in 2022 was like, look, this is how it should be. I just haven't. It took me like almost 3 years to get to it. I already had this idea, like these ideas. I've already written about them at length. I just couldn't get around to actually doing it. Rich Harris had a similar block with SvelteKit. It's very different when you have like Daniel Rowe, who's amazing, and then Evan doesn't have to worry about that, or the next team from React, like they're completely separate. Well, they used to be, but who knows? Maybe that's why they're getting kind of jammed up now. I mean, they're big enough. They have Meta and they have Vercel, and they're completely different, right? Right. So, yeah, this lets me focus on Solid a lot more, which needed to. It's crazy. Oh, this is a perfect lead in. It's crazy how long it's been since I got the focus on Solid. I noticed on my birthday that it had been I did a Google thing, and I asked Google to do the math for me. I was like, how long between this and this? I noticed that the difference between the release date of initial release of React 0.13 or whatever, like the initial public release of React and jQuery was 2,400 and I think 2,844 days or something. And the difference or was it 2,448 days? It's something like that. But on my birthday, the difference between when Solid was open sourced and that day, was 1 day after. It was 2,849 versus 48 or something, which was nuts to me because that's around the last, like I did a little bit that first year into 2019, like the 2018 to 2019, I did a bit of kind of core shaking a little bit there, but that's like the last time that first year was that I actually made a big change to the core of Solid in terms of reactivity and stuff. Like I focused on SSR. It wasn't just Solid Start. I spent like 6 years between Solid SSR, streaming, all that stuff. When I saw how important it was working on the Marco stuff, that we had a good solution to work on Solid Start. I spent so many years not touching. Everyone's like, why is Solid Signals not lazy? It's like, because I literally haven't touched them in 6 or 7 years. But on the same token, it's a testament to how, like when people pull out the JS Framework benchmark and they're like, oh, Vue Vapor now, blah, 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 or Svelte 5 ruins now have edged in front. It's like, oh, that's good. I mean, it's been 7 years, right? Like I also haven't touched the benchmarks, the performance. Like if someone went and picked up Solid in 2018 or whatever, they would have had the performance that you get out of modern Svelte or Vue, as of this month. So like, I don't know. It's crazy when you think of the whole life cycle where people, are like, oh, I don't want the latest, greatest things, shiny new tools, JS fatigue, whatever. And then it's like literally you could have, in the whole life cycle of an app, like in the past, like where picture how everyone rewrote stuff in jQuery and then they rewrote stuff in React. In that same cycle, you could have been using Solid the whole time. I'm not suggesting that it's popular, the right solution, but like it's crazy. And I guess it's only crazy now because other solutions like Vue or Svelte have kind of come around to using the same kind of solution. But it's hard because so much changed between when jQuery and React came out. Like we had Knockout, Backbone. We had so many cycles of this stuff. It felt like an eternity to believe that same eternity had happened since I first open sourced Solid is crazy, right? It speaks tons to the where the JavaScript ecosystem is, because all those guys are like, oh, new framework every week, like PHP and all this stuff. It's like, no, like it literally took 7 years for the JavaScript ecosystem to adopt this kind of thing. And it wasn't because it wasn't maybe the right thing to do. It was because people choose solutions based on maturity, popularity, job market. These are signs of maturity. Not everyone just flicking off to do their weekend projects. Otherwise, I think Solid probably would have been a lot more popular. Things have drastically changed. So much more that other solutions have had enough time to catch up rather than people choose new solutions. That is a testimony to maturity more than anything, right? Like, so what have I been doing the last 7 or 8 years? Well, working on SSR and figuring out exactly how I would fix things. And that's what I was showing you today. I've had a very, very, very long time to figure out where things should go. So like, yeah, what did I say here? People concerned that JavaScript frontend hasn't matured. I think this is a testimony to the maturity more than anything else. We have chosen stability and maturity over cutting edge and innovation, and that is a sign of our growth. Like it generally it's something that needed to happen, so it's a good thing. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's mind-boggling. The JS fatigue group is mind-boggling to me now, right? Like, okay. All right, let's go so we looked honeypot. Okay, I I'm kind of gonna agree with Tanner here. Maybe I'm just not pushing it hard enough. I still am doing This Week in JavaScript on Twitter because honestly, Twitter is doing better for me than Blue Sky. I feel like Blue Sky, there's just something odd about the type of conversations I get in. It's very, you know, how I wasn't subtweeting Blue Sky when I was talking. I did another tweet about people convincing people that React's good, but it's like, it's this weird intersection of like no build web component people and then like React diehards, maybe because Dan was over there doing work or whatever. And there's like very little in between that it's just such an two sides talking past each other kind of scenario that I don't even, I'm just like, you all are crazy. You know what I mean? So like, it's, yeah, it just, yeah, I don't know. It's just, there's like, there's a couple different zones, you know, like, I don't know how to put it. Like, there's a weird alignment between like web components, no build, Rails, like this kind of perspective. Maybe it's just like old school perspective, and then like there's also like this hard, yeah, I don't know. It's definitely two sides trying to form, and both sides are, I don't know. Yeah, I thought that at first, but I think people legit gave it a try, and I'm still giving it a try. I'm still tweeting and stuff. It's just like it's there's a different aspect on Twitter that I don't think you find there. Like I think Dev Twitter did a pretty good job of lifting and moving, but I think that like there's like VC Twitter or like I don't know, like there's like a different group of people that I also tune into, and their Blue Sky presence, they're not getting what they want out of it, so they're not being as effective, which means that they stay on Twitter. All right, so I guess we should talk about Vite, right? I mean, first, yeah, this is what I was talking about earlier, where Evan was showing Vue Vapor. And if you look at it, Solid has this problem right now in 1.0. This is really slow, but our selection is really fast, right? And then for this reason, we have this kind of split. Now, this is locally on his computer. I think it'd be a little tighter on the other ones. I imagine that these are all fairly close, but generally speaking, this has been the trade-off. If you look on there right now, Solid's slightly ahead of Svelte, but last release Svelte was ahead, and Vue Vapor is kind of edging out them both on this run, probably because it's on his machine. But if you look at in the actual tests, unless he did in fact get faster crate rows, which is possible, maybe the creation is faster, these should be kind of, you know, the split makes sense to me. It should be kind of close. If you looked at actually what I put up earlier with Solid Next, you see the same slowness here and this, except now this is fast. They're faster slightly than Svelte on cleanup, and I've confirmed that multiple and locally, at least proportionally. I can't speak against vanilla. And then this is faster. So I would not be surprised, even though I was not trying to improve performance of Solid, I think it might actually edge ahead of the others in the JS Framework benchmark because of the selection speed. It basically solved both problems. It's just an interesting thing. But obviously, it has to do with create selector. And Evan actually made something. There's no need for create selector or vmemo. Yeah, it's only that, so it's artificially slow, blah, 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 not worth optimizing, do normal code. And my only point is I actually do think the whole selection mechanism via projections isn't a real problem from a reactive standpoint. So I'm actually very excited that this is a general solution that ships with Solid. But it is, unless they follow, I agree. Just making a specific create selector seems kind of, like we're doing Solid, kind of a interesting hack. I was trying to show, I told you this problem has always bugged me, but it still bugged me how specific the solution was. I'm happy that it's a general solution now. But yes, View Vapor is getting much closer, which, as I said a couple streams back, Vue's kind of catching up on the streams felt a couple of years ago. That big gap we had, corner of the market on the kind of reactivity has kind of shrunk, which is amazing because Preact, Angular, Quick, everybody's using signals and getting more fine-grained, which means this is a complete shift from where things have been with React. And I'm very excited to be able to showcase off stuff like today because we're still mentally catching up to React with this capability, but we can do more than React, which is crazy. Right. Yeah, I think it's a category problem to solve as a general solution. We're going to create selective treatment, replace with something else. I think the problem is very much worth solving even the smallest highlight in the benchmark. Okay. Okay, let's is it time to talk about a couple of the React topics? Maybe. Okay, first one I would talk about is a little bit easier. There's been a lot of discussion. I think people are starting to realize that Next.js and RSCs aren't what they thought they were. It took me a while to mechanically explain it, but Theo, the big Next.js guy, decided that he was going to actually use React Router instead of Next.js to build his app. And then he was like, oh, I wonder how long it'll take to move T3 chat from Next to Hono. And Fred, who we all talk with very often, was like, all the big stack frameworks the last 10 years have made the exact same bet on coupling server client into a single isomorphic architecture. Now client-side spas are make a comeback and they can't adapt. I expect to see more of this. I disagree. I disagree actually relatively hard here. In principle, it's not, he's right, but the reasoning isn't quite on. And I can't speak for Nuxt. Nuxt always surprises me because I like Nuxt probably had a spa mode before anyone else did. The thing is, the isomorphic aspect isn't what the trap is. The trap is assuming that because you have the server, the old classic Rails model is where you want to be, like the remix loaders or RSCs. Don't get me wrong, RSCs are good, but they're not good for what Theo is trying to do here. RSCs are if you want to make Astro as a React app. Like, they fit in that similar zone, It's like, maybe this will be enough to make React good enough for e-commerce. Like that's the zone where this sits. And this is why I had to kind of call this one out a bit, because I created Solid Start specifically because I didn't want to lose the ecosystem, so that every single page app pattern would still apply. You'd build apps the way you build single page apps, and then you would essentially just augment server features in a way that was basically did not change the mechanical things. Like if you have loaders in Solid Router, they run on both sides. There's no like server loader. A server function is just an RPC call to replace an API call in the exact same location in the code. This kind of mentality meant that the server additions didn't have to change the way stuff worked. And even to the point of understanding that the separation between the route and the routers and bundling. I linked my talk, Shape of Frameworks to Come. If you haven't watched it, I'm hoping it's pretty good. I basically go from the history of create React app. I start with a solid demo that's basically create React app. I add every single feature, optimistic updates, single flight mutations, the whole server functions. I go through like I like local state. I even at one point, although I didn't do it in the talk, I cut it out. I added like Redux. Like I went through the whole history of web development all in Solid Start using Solid, and I conveniently forgot to turn SSR on. So at the end, you're looking at an app that looks completely modern with actions and doing server stuff like server actions or server functions and doing the whole thing. And then it looks like, kind of like we got there. And then I go to test progressive enhancement, and then it shows a blank page. And I asked the audience, I'm like, oh, why is it blank? And it was like, oh, we didn't actually turn on SSR. That's why it doesn't work without JavaScript. And the turn on SSR was like this. So we went from SPA to SSR with a flick, and everything was the same throughout. It's exact opposite demo that Rich Harris and the Ryan Florence did when they introduced their respective frameworks. Within 2 days of them, Ryan Florence did this trick where he was building a React app, and he had JavaScript off the whole thing. So he was doing server updates with forms and actions and everything the whole time, but no one noticed. And then at the end, he was like towards the end, he was like, oh, actually, like there's no JavaScript turned on. And then he's like turned on JavaScript, and no one realized that he had this React app working the whole time with no client-side JavaScript. Whereas I did the opposite. And I think the fact that both of those realities exist suggests that the statement by Fred is not true. However, RSCs aren't going to be the right solution for everything. And if SPAs are making a comeback, no, you're not doing RSCs. But there is a world in which the server to SPA break is not a big jump. Yeah, deep local first, yeah. So good time for him to come around and look at Solid again, I think, because I think we're going to be very good for local first. But yes, I think there's an interesting tension there. So yeah, it's interesting. I think what people are realizing is that RSCs and Next, like even Guillermo posts the stuff himself. He's like he's comparing themselves to WordPress, and I think that's actually right. Like when I think about Spotify and I'm going to build the e-commerce site, I want RSCs. I mean, I know Remix is there, but like conceptually, that's the kind of solution. I want idealized RSCs. I want those kind of things. But if I'm building, some local first thing, if I'm even building social media site, I'm not sure I want that. I mean, there's parts of it that I could probably string together, but yeah, it's an interesting, like if it was a media heavy site, like the Google Photos or stuff, I don't know. I want RSCs. Yeah, it's interesting. I just wanted to kind of call this out because I think that Next and RSCs are in this interesting spot where people are starting to realize that there are clear trade-offs, which they should have always get. But like, it took a while, and I think this week there was a lot of that kind of pushback feedback. Okay, what else? Oh yeah. On a similar note, you want well, I don't know. RSCs aren't not easy. People have called RSCs a lot of stuff. Conceptually, as a model, they are straightforward. They're hard to implement technically, but as a model, I think they are actually make a lot of sense. It's like when I pick up Astro and I'm like, okay, I've got my client components and I do this and I have a page and I render it and there's a few islands and then blah, like it's RSCs are fine. The problem is people are trying to, it's like saying, okay, I have Astro and I'm not going to use the features from my client side framework. Go build an app. That's a bit of like what the experience is like, because it's like, that you can go in and use React State and like React Query inside the client components and the things, but you're kind of like, don't do that. So it's basically like use Astro, but basically none of the advanced features in the client components and build something super interactive. I mean, good luck with that. Right? Like there's this weird disparaging world where you find yourself getting pulled out of that zone and feeling the tension. It's not it's not necessarily that RSCs can't make a good solution, you know. The idea that I like at RSC is that I could send a spot rate. Yeah, I mean, Astro does have a view page transition, which makes that feel better. But like RSCs are where people hit challenges, they have a harder time being an actual app because the mutation model is broken. Like if you're building static pages, basically, like if you're building stuff that you'd use for Astro for, you'll have a great time with RSCs. But then you also could be using Astro and be having a great time with Astro. Um, so it's like, yeah, you know, that's where the tension is. But back onto that whole thing, I saw Ryan Florence basically ask you guys, okay, if we do RCs, do you guys want to use them, or do you want to use our loaders, or do you want to just keep doing spa stuff? And he posted this up, and I opened the thing, and there's only like 10 minutes in, and there's only like 20 people who'd answered, and I'd answered spa stuff because, as you know, for me, that isomorphic, like that look at the spa stuff works. You know, like that's what we do with the starts. We basically have query, and then we feed server functions into it, right? And so I voted that, but I was surprised. It was like split evenly, like 30, 30, 30. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Do you think this will continue? Right? And it did. You're Ugly gained some more popularity towards the end, but spas came out ahead. At certain parts, RCs are ahead. At the beginning, loaders are slightly ahead. But this is a very even split. And there's a few ways you can look at this. You can look at this and say, look, that means that 70% of, or I guess not, it's 58% or 60, let's say 60% of this group of people don't plan to use RSCs, right? Or actually, sorry, the 11 too. So 70% of this group doesn't plan to use RSCs. That's one way of looking at it. But the other way is like, this is Remix, so these guys are going to be the highest loader to action thing, and categorically these are three distinct patterns, right? And they don't just only exist in Remix. Like get server side props is right here. This is get server side props too, right? This is like what we do with solid start and tanstack start. This is what next. So yeah, next page directory and Remix, next app directory, and solid start. I guess this is technically SvelteKit as well over here. I think Nuxt is here because they use like $fetch, but they keep like spa like isomorphic patterns. So there is a bit of a split, but they're general enough that you can apply it across frameworks in terms of a thing. But the fact in React, maybe it's fine that there are three different options because even across frameworks we can't decide on it. But it's interesting that these live in distinct worlds. From my perspective, like, what did I write here? It's interesting to see the poll if the remains of split. I speak volumes to how these are distinct worlds of problem most solutions recipe. Yeah, like they don't really meld together. It's like an either or, and it's a decision you have to make now before you do anything. It's the first decision you make. You're like, I'm making a new React app, and you go there, and the React team's like, go choose a framework. Choose. Good luck. And my favorite responses here is Sunil Pai, former React Core team member, creator Party Kit, WebSocket stuff. He's like, I was hoping you'd tell us. And Ryan says, I'm too old. It's up to the next generation to decide our fate. We are simply enabling it all. My response, I think everyone is. How is anyone supposed to choose? This is the current state of React. Like, seriously. It's very interesting when the first move you do as a framework is tell people to choose to make a decision that will impact the whole rest of what their experience is, what they're going to do in such a profound way. When, like, as a newcomer, you can't possibly make that decision. Um, It's also crazy that already three people are RCs. That being said, I think when you have the full push of the React core team backing them, you do kind of get here faster than you would otherwise, right? How do you choose between Rails and Laravel? Well, isn't there an easy thing there? You choose based on the language, but how do you choose the language, right? Like backend's in a funny place where JavaScript one language, so the UI framework like React Vue Svelte is essentially the language, and then once you choose that, you usually don't have that many choices. You choose Vue, you're like you get Nuxt. You choose PHP, you get Laravel. You choose Ruby, you get Rails. Do you know what I mean? React's a little bit wider, so there's more choice. But I feel like people should get into that mindset instead of comparing, because JavaScript is the only possible language. So the fact that there's different UI rendering frameworks is like saying, why you guys are crazy on the back end? Why do you have more than one language? Why don't you guys all just, what was that? Fortran or COBOL? Yeah. Why don't you guys just stop there? Right? Like that's when people talk to me about like JS frameworks and stuff from that perspective, that's how ridiculous they sound to me. Um, what do you what do you get if you choose Node? I think the biggest thing you get if you choose Node or JavaScript is that you get the ability to run your code isomorphically, which means that a huge unload on the client side in terms of UX is being able to manage that network gap. Now, obviously, being able to do so with like, you can set a protocol that works on both sides, some kind of RPC or whatever. But I'm talking about just like purely, we can use the information that when we render on the server on the web app, we can use that information to reduce the load on the RSCs. You don't get to do that in that sort of way outside of JavaScript, right? You don't get the single authoring experience. A better example is Quick. It's funny because there's something like Quick at Google and they actually use Java in the conversion, but the average developer doesn't have a crazy compiler that converts between Java and whatever. Like there's a reason, like I said, Marco, eBay bet on JavaScript from the back end, not for everything, they have Java servers and all that stuff, but just for the web UI layer, because there's such a benefit to what you can do on the client side by doing that. And unfortunately, we're stuck with JavaScript as the only language that's viable, at least from a load perspective on the client. So anything on the e-commerce side, I think you're mental not to use JavaScript on your backend web server if it has a certain degree of interactivity. Obviously, you could also write your stuff in jQuery, but if you're at a scale where you actually want to continue to develop and build stuff, you're kind of mental. Biggest downside limitation, the implementation. In theory, I think you could do better RSCs. I think it also they're MPAs. They're fancy MPAs that don't need to unload state, but they're MPAs. So anything that would apply to an MPA type architecture applies to RSCs, basically, in terms of mutation, require heavy client server side caching. If you could, the only thing is the client side navigation, but you can solve those in MPAs with a view transition. So generally speaking, if you're building websites that have pages, RSCs are fine. If you're building interactive app experiences, they are not so great. Oh yeah, I mean, yeah, PHP is big enough, so they have WordPress and Drupal. Yeah, sure. React's got Remix and thing. I didn't consider. I should have said WordPress. Like I didn't consider. WordPress is like a whole other thing. You're right. I didn't really think, but yeah, I mean, it's not really an apples to oranges comparison. Yeah, I mean, sorry, there's more frameworks. It's funny though that like they're so well established and have their zone that like everyone just kind of sits there and acts like nothing changes. And if JavaScript had done that, like we'd be in such a sad state of things. But the JavaScript has started doing that. React has become the thing. So it's taken forever for anybody to displace it. So I don't know what those people are complaining about. It's because React itself has changed. If React hadn't changed, I think we would have seen stuff change much earlier. So yeah, this is early on, like at 100 votes, being very even. Okay, so let's yeah, maybe React big enough split. Let's probably go to the next topic. Done 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 done. I think, are we on? Is it time to talk about Vite? Oh no, I'm ready about this one first. Yeah, sorry, I missed this. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so we're on this one. It's funny because okay, I'm trying to decide what's more tedious: dealing with someone who can't acknowledge React was wrong 20% of the time, or someone who can't acknowledge React was right 20%, 80% of the time. Oh man, this is a obnoxious comment, but it was just that like I feel like this way every time I talk to someone who likes web components. Um, and I think that's probably what triggered this. It just there's so much absolutism, and it's fine. It's just it's important that people are passionate about what they care about, but it's just like it's very interesting when you talk design decisions, and it's been coming up a bunch in Solid, and you know, people are like, do you follow React's lead or you do something different? And sometimes it's not a matter of following React's lead. You just do something that seems good or nice, and it happens to be the same thing that React has done. And then it's like, it seems like when I'm ever doing these discussions on the other side of the thing of like, we could also do this, it's something to do with web components. It's like I can do something. I could like live in a world where everything's really nice and everything looks nice and it's aesthetic and it's clean, and then it's like, or we can do the solution that's best for web components. And it's funny because I don't even mention web components here, but it's that same group of people that are that can't acknowledge React was right 80% of the time. I saw some conversation with Hypermedia. Let me see if I got the stuff in the book in the bookmarks. Um, uh, yeah, yeah. Oh, where is it? Let's pull this one out. Oh, I don't even have the full thread. This went on forever. You don't need Omnis UI when you can use Hypermedia correctly, people. I would I would like to see. Yeah, I'm. It's interesting. They should make the Strello demo with this stuff, but this conversation got really derailed on the difference between server side rendering and server rendering. I don't care that much. I would say there's a difference between classical PHP rendering and like stuff that's designed to run isomorphically. So I'm okay with people splitting this as different things. Um, there's some conversation about React inventing the term, and then other people like, oh, these other frameworks have it. But the thing is, if you go back, people were thinking about this stuff before, anyways. So like, uh, Jordan Walk. Oh no, Fax.js, not Xerox. My bad. When was this built? 14 years ago, maybe even longer. So I don't even. This is like 2010. This is an old experiment project. React is much better. So before he built React, seamless client server rendering. Write once, render anywhere, client or server. Reactive user only update on state changes. He doesn't use the term server side rendering, but this shows that even before Jordan created React, he thought of creating a server rendering hydration thing. React popularized the term, but if you want to talk about being ahead of its time, I think if you want to understand the beauty of React a little bit, is to understand that Jordan recognized that he could use the same model of templating and componentization to build client-side apps. This is the start of it. Like, it's pre-JSX, but you can kind of see the core of it right here. So this is before React, and it's explicitly basically set up on, he doesn't call it server-side rendering, but server-side rendering. Like, people were thinking about this stuff. So like, I don't know. I don't know where this, you know, the importance of this, but I think what's interesting here is somewhere down in this discussion, I'll see if I can find it. It's probably gonna be tricky here. I called out dbmon, which I thought was kind of cool because this is doing only 10 rows, but you can see that, like, you can crank up the mutations that it can update, and it can do the hover on effect. I think, where's the hover effect? There should be, yeah, there, yeah. So like, you can use these different models to do different things. The hardest part about this is, how do you compare something that like clearly uses the network versus something doesn't? The problem is these benchmarks that we made kind of suck, because like, we built them, like, this is just running as fast as the frame rate can handle it. Like, this one's doing way more rows and is like, you know what I mean? Like, what are we testing here? No one in their right mind should actually do this, right? Like it's funny because Stream can't keep up with it. On my computer, you can see like one is like 100 times faster. But it's because like these aren't comparing like things, right? And I think what we're kind of, where we're kind of getting to here is that, like, one of the challenges here is like, you can go, maybe this is an Excalidraw moment, right? Because it's like, I know Theo has done his chart before, but like, there's like, I almost want to reiterate on this silly chart here, because there's like a zone where traditionally you have like really client centric heavy stuff, and then you have server centric stuff. And like, over the years, this side has been getting kind of like aggressive and pushing back into here. So much so that people in this zone are getting really, really confused when they probably should have just stayed black. And what to make things even more confusing is that you have RSCs now, which actually probably should exist only here. And it's just like really interesting tension here, because I see people on this side basically claim that you don't need blue, which is absolutely bonkers, because it's the same reason we can't make a comparison on dbmon. But then also, like, there's this kind of zone where it's like, what if you it's kind of like, if you really want to stay blue and go farther, you can go this way. So it's like, I don't know. This has kind of been the tension here. You need both. Why I did data star. Exactly. Yeah. So like, yeah, I wasn't, it's just funny because this thread went off on so many different ways. I think there was this part of this conversation with Georgie that I've said, my thesis is AG Grid is the wrong way to build apps. You can change the same behavior with many orders melting less JS data than being sent to the front end. Hypermedia is not about SPA versus SPA. I think with that. No, that is not very. I'm not going to rebuild AG on the server just because the technology is wrong. Oh, okay. Yeah, I think I misunderstood what this was saying. I was actually suggesting that yeah, I'm actually suggesting that you need a decent amount of for highly interactive stuff. You need a decent amount of the JavaScript in the front end, unless you have stateful servers, which completely changes the thing. So yeah, I think I misunderstood this. Because like one of my like tensions here is that and I think, as you said, Datastar does both, because you get in this scenario, where's Mike Scaladraw, where it's like people sitting here going like, pretending like this doesn't exist, and then technically, while this is the optimal range, you can bring this blue or green all the way down to the end. So like this is kind of the tension of this whole thing. You can bring this all the way down, but this can't go the other way. That like yeah, it's just this like very weird just like conversation to be had that I've been having here. I only flagged this because, as I said, it was just people got into the definitions of like SSR and stuff, and I was just like, whoa, what's going on here? Where is it? Like, what's this? Yeah. It's crazy that this spun such a thing out. The truth of the matter is, I haven't. It's funny because the original post only, like, it doesn't have as much engagement as like literally the amount of comments and threads off this. It's crazy. I still want to see a Strello demo. I've seen someone make a Strello demo with like purely HTMX, and I was like, yeah, that's cool, but like, you're not convincing me that this is easier or better way of doing this compared to like say the Remix version. Like it's just like it's so much harder to make it jump through these hoops. So yeah, maybe we can talk. Maybe we can talk this sometime coming up. Imagine Strello without that's what you're gonna get. Well, yeah, which is just yeah, it's interesting. Unifying the model is like the trickiest part, which is why I'm very interested to see how this kind of goes. Vite has overtaken Webpack. I forgot I even flagged this, but good on you. Okay. Or Trellix, yeah, that's the remix, the remix demo. Yeah, sorry, Strello is a solid version. It's Trello with, yeah. What's this? Since sorry, before I do my last topic, the only reason I flagged this was Adam's making some joke about hydration, but this is I never thought about the solution. This suspense boundary received an update before it finished hydrating. This caused a boundary to switch to client rendering. The usual way to fix this is to wrap the original update and start transition. I don't know why I never thought of this. In Solid, we do the same thing. If you update state when you're in the middle of streaming, there's like nothing we can do. Like we're kind of screwed. But like because we can't hydrate like not up to state, like the whole thing breaks apart. So in Solid, we bail out in client render, and we probably don't even tell you. But and some people notice like some kind of weird double fetching or whatever going on. But start transition or the like is a way of actually solving this and saying do this after hydration has completely done. I mean, it's kind of awkward because hydration and streaming happens in steps. It's like pushing it to the very end. Actually, it only needs to push it as far as the suspense boundary highlighting. Yeah, no, I like this. I know this is just completely random, but this is just another example of React doing something smart. Yeah, but the fact that they got this specific an error is big props on them. Yeah, like like it's probably fairly easy to detect because it's actually very hard. It's kind of hard to detect these states. Um, so once you come up with the right heuristic to go like, this is what's happening, we need to bail. It's very easy to tell the user that. I just never thought of telling them that. But yes, we have like very similar heuristics in Solid. Okay, React core team when they see a V project. Nope, there's only trash. A lot of people subtweeting on this stuff, and you might be going like, "What the hell is going on?" I don't need to give you the full history on this, but let's just kind of let's talk about this. This comment is a little bit aggressive. Today we're deprecating Create React for new apps and encouraging existing apps to migrate to a framework. We're also providing docs when the framework isn't a good fit for your project, so you prefer to start by building a framework. I don't think it's my time to share. I read Mark Erickson's write up. I don't know if he's going to release it. Talked to core team. The ironic thing was, I showed this on stream before. I didn't actually show it though. Um, my falling out with React. I wrote it 21 days ago before I knew which way this was going to fall. It's very similar but shorter and not as detailed as what Mark Erickson wrote. We are surprisingly aligned. In fact, I feel like a lot of the React ecosystem is aligned. Yeah. Like it's there's a lot of anger here, and it's somewhat it's justified from the perspective that React is changing, and even this message suggests the thing because they're talking about deprecating Create React app, which is something that needed to happen. It needed to happen a couple of years ago when Theo originally opened up the issue, and they're just like replace it with Vite because it's the same swap in. And the React team's been very persistent on not doing that, and you know why? It's because they never want to be here again, where people are just doing random crap and they can't account for it. And the problem is it broke, and it's still 2 years later, like it's still the thing. And they finally managed to like move it forward and come up with this stuff. But the problem is because when your framework is based React, you actually have to kind of like go like there has to be a path from A to B. I commented on this section. I already mentioned like the don't vote against, don't bet against Vite thing. It's just every framework uses Vite, and they're playing off that here a bit. But here, let's read this out loud. Do you recommend Vite? We provide several Vite based recommendations. React Router v7 is a Vite-based framework which allows you to use Vite's fast development servers and build tools framework that provides routing and data fetching. Just like other frameworks, we recommend you build a spa with React Router v7. We also recommend using Vite when adding it to an existing project or building a framework. Just like Svelte has SvelteKit, Vue has Nux, Solid has SolidStart, React from actually using a framework that built the tools for Vite for a new project. Now, quick call out. I don't know. This is probably the first time Solid's been mentioned by anything official from the React core team. This is a huge, like, I love that we managed to get on this list. I honestly like. I think we were once mentioned in like when they released server actions, but that was like a Vercel kind of thing. Solid Start was mentioned as inspiration for that, but this has never happened, so that's pretty cool. But when I read this, my answer, what I hear, and maybe I'm wrong, is I hear no. Do you hear no still? Does this still sound like no? Well, I mean, this is kind of one of the interesting things here is because after they did this, they were like people were like, oh, what about Handstack? What about Waku? What about this? And it's like they have to go down that path because there's no single answer here, and you can't just take the baseline. Fred says it reads a no. Well, I mean that is why I wrote what I did. Do we recommend Veet? There was like a missing wall on the edge of there. It's forcefully avoiding yes, which has always been the answer. And okay, so this decision is justified. It's hard to build all these pieces out. If you especially picture like Webpack. No one wanted to build Webpack configs. So setting people on a path where they're just like building these spas like brainlessly without knowing and saying that's the React experience is not what they want, especially when they think RCs are probably the preferred React experience. They want to get the latest updates. They want someone responsible. Like the Veet templates, there's no one really responsible other than, the Veet team. They do a good job. They keep them up to date. People contribute. But it's not like someone has something on the line like you have with Remix or whatnot. Right? But you know what the problem is? This is like the most forceful acknowledgement that React is not the React used to be, which is fine. React can evolve, but it is so many degrees from just a render library or UI, a library for building UIs, that we can't, in good conscience, basically say, oh yeah, just use what you want, go for it. That's what changed, because they talk here about all these ones, but go to Svelte's homepage. There's Svelte yes, but they immediately are like, here's the Svelte templates. Solid. They're all Veet templates, and then they're like, oh, you can also use Solid Start. Vue, I know, has that split because Nuxt and Vue have actually classically been farther separate. So, in fact, all the other frameworks actually recommend Veet, and often, sometimes even Veet first, over their meta framework. Like, it's fine that React isn't, because React does not wish to be standalone anymore. But this is like, I think I mentioned this to people before. The moment, like, I've always been kind of a pretty big React supporter given my position, but the moment that like I was just like just irate with React wasn't because of like some incompatibility with the ecosystem. I understand when you have developers in the ecosystem, there's friction there and they want things a certain way and you got to look at the direction of the project. I get that. And it wasn't about like, oh, RSCs or Vercel's owning Next or any of that. It was when Andrew Clark was like, Next blank is the real React 18 release. And I know he was partially joking, but that, and I've said this before, I think in the pre-stream, that's when the line was crossed. It was a quiet line cross. Maybe some people saw it, but that's like, that's when it crossed. And I know I think I mentioned the last stream, when I wrote that article, I compared it to the Happy Days jumping the shark reference. And the fact that we still can't recommend Veet is just how far we've come. Like every single aspect out there, people are like, oh yeah, sure, you could use Veet, blah blah blah. I think I saw something from David. Do we recommend Veet? Yes, unequivocally. It's the best alternative to React. React requires a framework is a silly concept. Yes, to RCs. React is not RCs. It's beautiful to touch with the customers. What's another one? Someone wrote something here that they're like, yes, we do React training. Veet's not real and spas didn't exist in the first place. It's just Matt Carroll replied, like, posted this. I saw this before I posted, to be clear. This was me actually responding to this. I wanted to draw everyone's attention to this. And yeah, there's more conversation. I haven't seen this yet, so we'll see. I'm sorry, this probably disgruntled people, but I'm reading this paragraph. It's the most indicative thing that I've seen React has completely lost touch. It's justifiable, sure, but it isn't React. React's selling point, complete selling point, was the fact that it was this like lightweight kind of thing. The fact that they suggested that it needs handholding is crazy. It's part of maybe refined process, moving to the next stage, getting the WordPress crew. You know, RCs are great for that. So part of me, the reason I haven't shared the article is because I don't need to be overly hostile here. It sounds like React's already packing bags and leaving, you know? Like, I don't have to do anything. Like, where they're going, I could care less to follow, you know? So if they're just leaving space here, others can take on that mantle, you know? So I don't need to, I don't really need to pick this apart much. It saddens me because this is not the same React as before. I think it saddens people in the ecosystem. There's a reason why Tanner or Mark have that anger things. Some of it is much deeper than what, you know, I'm going off here. But there's been a whole shift in mentality where React needs to be to get to that next stage. And it's fine. I said something to Mark, he never responded to me. But it's like sometimes I feel like the current ecosystem is just the pillars that are needed to support the pivot to the next direction. And when the time has come, those will just be ripped out, and you know they just won't exist anymore. And it's hard when you're one of those pillars. Like Redux and Mark Erickson's contributions have been foundational, but it's not the foundation of React of the future. You know, I haven't talked to Michelle Westrate, about this MobX, like state libraries, data fetching. There's the whole portions of the ecosystem that don't fit. Even React Router is getting kind of yanked into this stuff. They're still afraid of Alex Russell. I mean, that's fair. Alex Russell is in that like web component crowd where you just like, it's tricky sometimes. If you want a library, use Preact or Solid or something else. So let's see what there's some people saying this has to do with Vercel. It doesn't have to do with Vercel. Let's see what they say. React doesn't need a framework. Router is a routing library. Read is a tool we should recommend to spin up simple. Sorry, I agree with Ryan here. Thanks, David. I don't understand this. Vite has the same exact limitation to create React app, which powers post covers in detail. Why would they recommend using it without a framework like React or describing all that? Use Router anyways. It's because it's not just React. It's React and stuff. I get it. Parcel is a competitor to Vite. So choosing one bundler would equally not be good. But suggesting that the baseline of coming in, because I already showed this earlier when I was talking about the remix and the RSC stuff. It's not React anymore. It's like when people are like, I'm not a React developer, I'm a Next developer. We're kind of getting there, which means they're telling no one, if like that's the mentality, they're telling no one to use React, which means I guess React's dead, right? There we go. React's dead. Because like essentially by denying Vite, they're denying React. Is saying something like we recommend Vite if you're building a single page app really that hard? I'm trying to understand your point, but I'm having trouble. What's the issue with encouraging us to use frameworks? It's still without it, but it's challenging to get it right. I'm not arguing. It's challenging to get it right. Why does it have to be challenging to get it right? I don't understand the rep. Yeah, no, it's not that. It's just this has been a very long thing where I get it's not about whether this is justifiable. I think it is. It just means that React is vacating a certain space that they previously occupied. They're lightweight at a time they're competing with Angular and jQuery. The thing is, what makes React so special is a combination of best practices, but not enforced rules. Otherwise, Angular was a framework. Angular had services and all these pieces. I avoided Angular like the plague. This is why I still don't know anything about Angular. You know, I've learned it over time. I have good friends on the team now, but like, it's not what what I was looking for in a framework or a tool, which is fine. React is no longer that. Right. So React library still works, but the docs are product with a different audience. That's fair, but I'm going to hold by it that if Vite can't be a recommendation, React is effectively dead. Maybe that's what they're trying to do. Maybe they're trying to kill React. And I don't mean like that people won't use it, but actually like essentially say like React is not a thing next to remixes. Like if you successful make that transference from this to that next level, they've immortalized themselves in a sort of way without people actually using React. They are using React, but like it's that kind of thing. Okay, I'm just catching up with chat here. Sorry. Vite with no plugins is not right for the audience that talks, but Vite with React Router is. Yeah, I mean, it's because of the work that they did with React Router to kind of get it to where it is that it's kind of like been passable, I guess. It's just like it has to come down to the ownership thing, but I think this is very indicative, and it's a reflection. The fact that this took 2 or 3 years. I know there's other important things to address, but it very much reflects on this kind of change of identity. As I said, I was I wasn't sure what they're going to do this when I saw this. I kind of predicted that this was going to happen. This is just, oh man, I don't actually have to say anymore. React is just quietly packing up bags, and as I said, those people who get this, you're welcome to come over here. Like, thank you, React. Uh, mm. Like, V can totally replace old Rails stock webpack, but I'm resistant to Vite as a replacement. I think the logo dev before npm build is okay. Vite is great. Everyone in every other ecosystem knows Vite is great. The only people who are arguing with me are probably React developers who don't like, you haven't used it, or don't or don't like. Maybe they're used to the frameworks, so like they've already experienced like this greater level of things, and they don't want to like lower level. But like, Vite consistently is the place where developers don't have complaints. It has higher satisfaction than any project. Yeah, I don't know. We have not been the target audience for years now, but this is like saying like this is the final shove off the cliff. Right. Yeah. None of these things happen in a vacuum space. This is another common thing. Like, once you realize something, once you put the vision in thing, everything else will follow those decisions. Yeah. They're almost recommending Stansec start beta over the stable static router and Vite combo. Pretty much like that. That's where it's kind of nuts to me, but it's just like I probably shouldn't dig any more into this because they're just kind of shooting themselves in the foot against this audience. It's fine. Like there's a different target out there and they're getting there. But like good for you. That's I mean, I guess that's a do we recommend it? Like it's almost funny. The react to beat was almost like the jump to react from jQuery. There you go. Yeah. Like from Webpack a little bit. Yeah. This is the biggest pro beat statement from the React team up to date. So they're definitely listening. It's just like you can tell how begrudgingly it is in the tone. Like it just you can hear it. They're trying to be like level about it, but it's like when there's like a spectrum and they're sitting like way over here and they're like they moved like outside of their spectrum to over here towards the middle and they're like, okay, I think that sounds pretty level. And everyone else is like way over here and they're just like, wow, you're like off the deep end. Like it, yeah, which but it's like this difficult delicate balance to reach. So like I get it, but it's also like it's not a decision people will understand, which is hard. It's not like it's just not a decision that people understand. You know, I mean, part of it is just people thinking things the way they've always been, right? Like David Kramer says here, React doesn't need frame render. It's a library, blah 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 blah. Beats right? Like he's also posted about if he's going to build a site completely with HTML or Rails backend and not use React or whatever. So like some people like having that split. React is trying to build this unified future, but it comes at a cost. There's trade-offs. And as I said, the kind of people who get alienated from this are some of the longest time supporters. But let's be fair. I think the cards are pretty much on the table. This has been a very long progression. They're not really hiding anything. That was my one comment to Mark. I was like, I think it's admirable that you try and lay this out as a communication thing, and benefit the doubt and all this. But there have been communication issues, but a lot of this is kind of intentional. They're like, look, we are moving this way. We are doing this thing. Here's how you come with us. And the community's like, no. And they're like, okay, well, how about like we do kind of like this? And then you see, this is how you fit in, come with us. And the community's still like, no. And they're like, okay, well, we're still walking. They're like, no. And they're like, we're almost there. We're touching it. We're leaning against it. There's a kid's book, Pandora. And then they're finally like, they're like there and they're like, we're opening the door, we're walking out the door. Like this is a long time coming. This is not a surprise to anyone. Yeah, I mean, I wish you luck on your next journey, React. I think there's new it's kind of like watching someone go off into the horizon and over the hill because there's mountains on the other side that they have to go conquer and you're just like good luck. I mean, there's been it depends. See, maybe this is the weird thing. Their comms have been kind of awful to most people, but I understand what they're saying. Generally speaking, I haven't found their comms that difficult to understand. There's been like gaps, but I feel like I understand what they're saying. So, like when they did the whole like fully React thing and didn't recommend Astro, it's pretty clear the progression. It's like it's probably the same reason why I'm reading so much into this, because I feel like I've understood what they've been saying this whole time. Maybe the people who've been saying that the comms have been bad are also the people who don't get this. Yeah, I don't know. Dan had a. If you go to the official docs with the Veet stuff, Dan also had a. There's the same tone. You can feel it. It's so funny because doc writers are always very sensitive to tone, and like I've been corrected multiple times for using too like brainy of a tone, talking down a little bit, like, and for docs it's really important not to do that. Even if you're like trying to say like, look, it's just this, it's only this. Don't worry about anything else. Just focus on this. You can't say like basically or simply or like, even if you're trying to emphasize that, you don't do that. It assumes that the even though you're trying to like make it clearer and simpler and remove the noise, it's assuming that what you're expressing is an easy idea, and not everyone will necessarily find it easy. So there is that whole thing. So it's, yeah, it's interesting. The horizon is full of AI generating hella people. Yes, exactly. That's the probably the future of React, and it's not a future that I care to participate in or care even remotely about. So let's do it. Yeah, remember, being less than ideal is a factor, but it's more the vision meaningfully diverge from the community needs or wants. No amount of community can fully reconcile that. Anyway, as I said, so that's why I'm not going to publish what I wrote, because it just sounds damning in a certain way, and it's similar to what Mark wrote, maybe less anger edited out. And Mark did so much better version that if he ever publishes it, I strongly recommend reading at least the first part. The second part is very lengthy, but like he covers the stuff, and I think it's good, especially at least to serve as a history. But if anything from the stream you should get is, why are we even talking about this? The shit that we showed earlier in the stream is just so much cooler than this. So like, who cares? Why are we talking about CRA? It's been dead for 6 years anyways. Or why are we worrying about Veet? It's obviously the choice. We don't have to debate about it. And why do we care if the React team does everything possible not to recommend it? Everyone's going to use it anyway. It this doesn't matter. So I think I'm going to leave it on that note. All right. So you all have a great weekend, and happy Valentine's Day. And hopefully I'll get Tanner maybe next week or the week after. So yeah, you all have a good one.